Good evening, everyone. Just waiting for everyone to trickle in, and then we will get started.
Hey, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Nice work, Max, getting the stream up and running. So we are live on YouTube as of now. So as soon as this video is done processing, it should be available to you all shortly thereafter. So Dana won't have to go and process the video again. So we'll send the link out once it's live. Just FYI to everyone. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get kicked off. Is that all right with you, Max? If you get started here, waiting for anyone else that you're aware of? Okay. All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Nice to see you all again. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time here just to answer any questions that folks had for the Capstone requirements. Oh, before I forget to mention to you, so Max will be your instructor the rest of the week. And so I'll hand it over to him shortly here. But I just wanted to take a moment. If they don't have questions on the Capstone requirements, I'm hoping that everyone had an opportunity to read that. I figured that rather than me simply just reading the document to you all, we can just have a discussion. You can ask any questions you have. If you didn't read that, please read that by end of day today if possible, and then you can ping your questions after this call. But hoping to carve out at least 10 minutes. So at 5:45, I'll hand it back over to Max. But I'd like to answer any questions folks have on the Capstone project. So before I do that, though, there is one quick thing I do want to share, and then one update that was made from the document if you ended up reviewing it yesterday or earlier today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for you all and for the recording as well. And I'm just going off the announcements here. And whenever I'm saying stuff, everyone just FYI, like I will always be referencing that announcement document. Just as a heads up to everyone. So can everyone see my screen, hopefully? Can folks see the announcements document?
Good to go.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, let me just zoom in a little bit. All right, so one thing before answer questions here. One thing, let me blow it up a little more, sorry. So we had a Trello board template basically from our first cohort, and let me ping this along in the chat for everyone, just so they have access to this announcements document. If they don't, give me 1 second, lost my chat here. So I just ping this along as well, just for links for everyone. So we put together a little Trello board, and I know that you are all hopefully somewhat familiar with Trello by now, and it was a nice kind of parlay from Will's talk yesterday. So I'll switch to that really quickly. So we created a sort of Capstone template Trello board for you all. So we're hoping that this will be a resource you'll be able to use to kind of keep track of all your features, all your stories, and all your tasks, your Capstone projects. So if you're signed into Trello, you should be able to go to this link, and I'll ping this along in the Zoom chat as well. I keep losing my chat window, I'm sorry. Where did my chat window go? Sorry, I keep losing it. I just sent that along in the Zoom chat. So this board has, I think that you've all done a little bit of sort of the agile world, and there's a big README here explaining what this board is, what all the lists mean, and so on. So I would encourage you all to use this as a resource. We kind of put proposed dates on there. They're loose dates, but they should hopefully be able to kind of start to let you know where you should be at in your Capstone project, and that document kind of speaks to it a little bit as well. But these are very, kind of granular on the different things and different features you should be able to build on your Capstone project based on what you're learning in the curriculum. So this is kind of our first time piloting this as well. We used a little bit from the first core and kind of iterated upon it. So I love your thoughts and feedback on this, but I'm hoping that this will be a useful resource for everyone. And if everyone wants to, just to give it a shot, if you log into your Trello account and then go to that link I sent for the Trello board, you should have a button at the top here that says create board from template. And then you should be able to have this board like created, exactly as it is. And you can use this kind of moving forward for your Capstone. We're not making it required as of now, but we hope that it will help, and there's due dates on all these just for kind of, again, tentative loose dates for all the different things. Obviously, like you'll have your own tasks and cards and stories as you get your features along, but this sort of provides like a high level timeline. So just for where we think you should be at. Again, we know that there's a lot going on in the program. So these are more for sort of your reference and trying to kind of keep on track with everything else moving on. If you fall behind on these, again, it's sort of like a loose date. But we think this is a pretty good indicator for where you should be at sort of in the Capstone. So, feel free to review it if you have questions, thoughts, but this is sort of like the backlog, and then you can use this board if it's a helpful resource. And again, very simple workflow here. The nice thing about using a template is you can kind of tweak it to however you'd like to use it. But we're hoping that this will be helpful. So that's on the Trello side. And then really quick, just from the two updates and then ultimately sort of what you have to do for your next steps to your Capstone. So there was an update for this just regarding the actual form submissions you have to do for the Capstone project. And so we used to have, and if you looked at this yesterday or earlier today, this has changed. But we used to have one form that included sort of intake data and your update. We've created those into two forms just for, because it wasn't very clear. So there's one form you'll submit only one time to us. That's called the intake data form. This will basically be your project idea, the problem you're solving, a description of it, and then your proposed solutions to that given problem. So you only need to submit that once to us. It's also in the Google Classroom. If your project idea changes, we do ask that you submit that intake data again. Well, that's a one-time submission for us. And the other is the Capstone update, which will be a weekly submission where you'll give a status report of where you're at, the problems you're working through, etc. So right now we have both of those in the Google Classroom with the due date of the 4th. So that'll be Sunday at midnight. So if you have any questions or concerns just on the update, that was the only update to that Capstone document. But hopefully that'll help just with some, because I know folks had some questions on the forms and what they actually needed to do for this. So hopefully that helps kind of clarify what you actually need to submit for us. And I'll be sending reminders to just with the updates and the demo days and all that good stuff. So all that being said, any questions? I'll pause here. Any questions on anything I just said regarding Trello, the Capstone document? Again, I'm not going to read off this Capstone document just for sake of time, but I'm hoping you all have an opportunity to review it and ask me any questions you might have. And if you didn't have an opportunity to review it, please do so, and we can handle questions kind of asynchronously here in Slack. So with all that, I'm going to shut up. I don't have any questions at all on the Capstone project or anything I just said here. Happy to answer them.
Once we do the form, the one-time form, are you guys gonna, I just want to make sure that my idea is feasible or, okay to go. Are you guys gonna, I guess, we'll get a yes or a no on our thoughts?
Yes, great question,
Okay.
Susan. That's exactly why we're having you all do this, so we can kind of assess it. and kind of help you and along with the instructors figure out what the overall scope is for that idea, right? So that's why we ask for this. We'll go and review it, and then we'll circle back with you all, just like thumbs up or thumbs down, or hey, maybe this is a good idea, but maybe try to reduce the scope a little bit. So great question, Susan. That's exactly what we'll do.
Okay, perfect. Because I have one idea. So if it's not good, I got to start over.
And in fact, what I would encourage you all to do is, and every time you have a separate idea, just submit the form more than once. So like if you have 2 or 3 ideas, and in fact, I would encourage everyone to have 2 or 3 ideas, and you submit them all, then we can review it and say, hey, I think this idea is kind of your best bet. So I know it's a tedious thing. And there's the questions on there are to help you kind of refine that idea as well, so you can really get specific about what you're actually building. So if you have more than one idea, feel free to submit it multiple times, and then we can discuss.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions I can help to answer on the Capstone project, folks? Mentors for Capstone, Brandy, you had a question on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, how can I help?
Well, I was working with Drew before this. Could I go back to Drew for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So whoever you think, would be able to help with your capstone, whether it's an instructor, a TA, yourselves, right? Like all the students, right? So finding someone that can help you out through that. And this is something that we can try to take away and RN to, and perhaps creating some more formality around the mentorship piece. And then we had kind of discussed this. If folks think that'll be helpful, we can certainly do that. But yeah, whoever you think would be best fit for a mentor, absolutely, feel free to do that.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm still not sure. I have a general idea of like the audience and everything, but if we're able to do like a real world thing for a real organization or whatever, is that possible? Would you rather have us just, like pretend so we get the idea? Because I'm thinking of reaching out to a few places just to see maybe what their needs might be. They'd be my guinea pigs, but
Yeah.
yeah. So thoughts on that? Issues either
Yeah,
way?
good question. So whatever you're interested and passionate in, go for it. So if it's a real world thing, if it's like a silly goofy project, I mean, you can build whatever you want, right? There's no real guidelines for like how realistic it should be. I mean, I'll use HackUps as an example. I'd say like 80-90% of the projects, right, are for fun, right? Folks kind of hack on stuff, and this is what you'll be doing over the 24 weeks. The other 10-20%, there might be a real opportunity to create a business from those projects and ideas. But this capstone project, and this is perhaps, if it's not in there, I should put this in there, but the whole intent of the capstone project is to celebrate your learning over these 24 weeks. It's not to say like, oh, like look how cool or awesome our project is. Obviously, we think they will all be, right? But it's to say, here are the skills I've learned throughout Careers in Code. I'm going to now apply them to a capstone project that I'm going to be able to show my community. So
like
that's
a portfolio.
Does that help, Carolyn?
Yeah, but I guess I'm kind of interested in trying to meet a real-time need.
Yeah.
With an organization, maybe someone that I have contacts with, and I just didn't know if that might get a little too complicated, and I should just like in my mind I could say, this is an app for organization XYZ that serves this population, but not really do it for an organization. That might be smarter.
So the one thing, and this is for everyone too. So if you want to do that, Carolyn, that's awesome. But the one thing I would caution you with is to eliminate as many dependencies for this capstone project as possible, right? So if you're reaching out to folks, getting a lot of people involved for their thoughts and feedback, you create a dependency. And this is like a very real world software development problem too. But you create other people, you create other problems. You have to wait on emails, you have to set up calls. Those all take time, right?
24 weeks wouldn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like the idea, I really do, but just for sake of time, you know, create something that doesn't have those dependencies. Like you can set up a call and be like, hey, like I'm gonna make this thing awesome, but you know, it's just be very, very cognizant of that.
So you could reach out and say, you know, if I were to do this in real time, you know, what's the need you have, because I want to do a prototype, you know, for my class. And so it would be based in a real situation, but it wouldn't be tied into.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions I could help to answer on the Capstone project, folks? And if you don't have any right now, you know, Slack, happy to answer them asynchronously as well.
One thing I'll throw out is keeping in the Hack Upstate spirit. This is not a business competition. This isn't a competition at all, right? So you don't need to worry about, oh, well, you know, if I make an app for ordering groceries, I need to have people to pick the groceries and ship the groceries and all that stuff, right? Like this is purely an app, right? So you don't need to worry about how the app's going to make money or you know who you're going to sell it to or any of that stuff. The whole point of this is to keep it in your code and to show off what you've learned. So that's just one avenue that I know I am constantly going down on ideas. It's like, oh, what's next after this? And it's important to kind of bookmark it and say, I'm focusing on just getting this out the door and having something to show off. And that's kind of the point.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, Max, and thank you for hammering that home. Yeah, like Hack Upstate and Careers in Code, we're about celebrating technology. So we don't care about your business model at all. We just care about the tech. If you think your project has a viable business behind it, that's great, that's awesome, but we're not concerned with that at all.
Alina, you asked a good question for a website or an app. So the goal here is to do a full stack web app. And so what that means is an app that's got a server running on the back end and is connecting to the database. However, if you've got an idea that you're like super gung-ho on and you're like, I really want to do this and there are no database aspects of it, your mentor may be able to help you work in those aspects just so you can show that off and say, look, I am a full stack developer. I know how to connect to a database. But also we're not gonna, you know, say, no, you can't do that because there's no way you can get a database in there. So when I say app, I specifically mean a web app. If you go out and use all of your learnings and make a mobile app for that, that is great, and we'll encourage you to do that. But the Capstone itself is all about creating a web app or a website, either or.
Good question. Any other questions, folks, that either myself or Max can help to answer regarding the Capstone? Cool.
I just put a couple things in the chat just so you kind of know what I'm thinking. I don't know if you're looking at chat now or not, Jesse, but.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful, Carolyn. So in that intake data, so that's perfect, right? So that's the whole point of that intake form, is to submit those ideas and those problems and so forth, just so we have it all in one place, and then we and all the instructors can review it. So you're on the right track. All right. Any other questions, folks? I know I'm already over my time, Max. Apologies.
No, you will be in about 15 seconds, though.
All right. Okay, if anyone has any follow-up questions, please let me know. One huge favor too, so we're planning to send out a newsletter. We took a bunch of photos of like the Zoom during the opening ceremonies, but they all didn't come out very good. So I'd love to get a class photo. I'm just gonna take a screen grab of the Zoom chat. So if everyone can like smile, if they're comfortable being on video for that. If you're not comfortable being on video, turn your video off. No one's gonna judge you. But I'd love to get a picture of our class. I realize we haven't done that yet and we're 3 weeks in. So if everyone's ready, I'll count down 3, 2, 1. Again, if you're not comfortable being on video, turn off. We're not gonna judge you, but I'd like to grab a photo of everyone. All right, I'm gonna count down here. Let's see if this works. All right, ready, everyone? 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right, let me just make sure I got that, folks.
Fromage.
I appreciate you all. Give me 1 second. So I make sure I got it. All right, I got it. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And one other huge favor, if it's not too much trouble, if you take a picture of like your workstation, like a selfie or whatever, that'd be super cool too. We'd love to start promoting that if you're comfortable in submitting that to us through our channels and our newsletter and all that good stuff. So thanks, everyone. And I'll hand it over to Max for the rest of the instruction time.
All right. So in keeping with tradition, what did Karen cover yesterday?
Beginnings of JavaScript.
All right.
She taught us numbers, strings, booleans, var, which is now let, const, nan, which is not a number.
Yep. Good. Ariel said JavaScript in the console. Yep. The console is definitely a useful tool for being able to test your code kind of in a non-file environment, just see if something is running.
And
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. The two ways that you can enter it, you can either you can have like two different lines where you name the variable and then you give the value of the variable by the name, or you can put it all kind of together. Something, I forgot what they call that, but I understand it.
String concatenation.
Thank you. Technical.
Or adding two strings together, or whatever. String concatenation is the more technical term. But whenever you take two things and shove them right next to each other, that is called concatenation in programming. All right. Any questions? Anything that you guys saw in the news that you have questions about? Any random topics? Okay.
Are we done?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I received a newsletter and it talked about the Suez Canal. You know how the given, okay. So it said the ship's free, but the next time this happens, know about it. And it was talking about, I guess, like building your own code to do that. Does that make, okay.
So there is a kind of this trend where whenever something happens in the news, some smart ass developer, pardon my language, comes out and will create a site like istheshipstillstuck.com, and it is literally just a page that says yes, the ship is still stuck, or no, it's all clear, something like that. So what can become of that is that you can create an API, an application programming interface, where in addition to being able to go to that website, you could hit this API and it would send you back some data on whether or not the ship was stuck or not. So one of the developers of the website, and I have not read this article, so I'm not saying this is definitely what is happening, but they could have done one of two things. They could either have set up a newsletter that is basically checking maybe an official data source like the Panama Canal, Transport Authority website or whatever it is, and then sending out an email about it. Or they could have developed this API that returned this, is shipping happening through the Suez Canal Boolean to pull in what we learned yesterday, and it would be a true false. So it is common to actually build out these dashboards at your workplace so that you can get a quick idea of how everything is running, right? So you may have multiple servers that you're managing. You may have multiple APIs. You may want to make sure that the responses coming back from those APIs are pretty quick. And so it is common to build out a dashboard that kind of is a quick view of all of your resources, and then to be able to display that on one page. So the get alerted next time this happens, it may be an API that they're allowing you to hook into. It may be a newsletter that they're generating. But I think the more real world use connection to that is that there are oftentimes status APIs, so that you can get a quick check of how everything is running, and then report that out all on one central place, normally called a dashboard. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I didn't know if they were going to be tracking all big boats that might get stuck somewhere. And so thank you.
Yep. Other questions other than a barking dog?
I had a quick question. I heard in the news, wasn't this week, I think it was last week, there was a high school senior that won a prize because she figured out a new algorithm that had an infinite number of matches. And that was very exciting about whether for organ transplants or dating websites, like instead of a finite set. And that was a big deal. And I wasn't quite sure if that's something like we're going to be building algorithms in this course, correct?
Yeah, so algorithms are kind of one of those words that you hear and you go, ooh, algorithm, math, fancy, complicated, right? And in programming, the fact of the matter is an algorithm is as simple as adding two numbers together, or can be as simple as adding two numbers together, right? So we're not going to be doing this deep dive into algorithms, but a complicated algorithm that we use is calculating BMI, your body mass index, right? So how tall are you? What's your, how much do you weigh? And then we return out this number. So an algorithm is really anything that you put data into and get a result out of. You could also think of it as a formula going back to, Algebra 1 days. So we won't be diving into any super advanced algorithms, but there will definitely be times where you go, oh, I want to add these two numbers together, or, this user just entered two numbers and I need to get the result, or stuff like that, where we will definitely be using algorithms. We just won't be going into super in-depth ones. There is this interesting phenomenon going on right now where other fields are kind of seeping into computer science. So probably the best example of this is data science, right? And this notion of, before, it used to be super easy to crunch numbers because there was a small set of numbers. But now, as we're getting into millions or billions of numbers getting generated, all of a sudden we need to use technology to solve those problems. So there are a lot of data scientists getting into more traditional computer science fields like databases and Python to do all of that processing work. So the same goes for mathematics, right? Is we're getting to this point where, you can't pull out your TI calculator that you have and punch in those numbers and get the results. And so what you need to do is have the fundamentals of computer science under your belt so that you know how to program the computer to solve these algorithms or come up with new ones or analyze large data sets or whatever it may be. So we'll definitely be giving you a taste of that throughout the program, but there won't be any like one specific day on algorithms or doing a deep dive on that. But good question. Any other questions?
I have a question that relates to the free code camp exercises, and I don't know if we're going to cover that a little later or now's the time.
Ask it now, and I can always boot you off to later.
Okay, lesson 6. Not hard, but I can't seem to figure out what I'm doing right or wrong. And I checked help, and I was going to watch the video, but then it didn't work. I mean, I understand camel case. I understand, varying the names a bit. But and I looked in the help, and other people, not in this group, but other people I didn't really understand that either. It didn't make sense. I can't go to lesson 7 until I get lesson 6, and I want to get it. So anyway, that's my question.
Yeah, let's save that for the break.
Great.
And you can screen share through that. And then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So as I am hijacking class here, I want to go through a quick overview of what we're going to be covering. So let me share my screen. So Karen put together this super basic page, and we're hoping to accomplish two different things with this lesson. One is getting that quick layout done of playing around with Flexbox here. Can blow this up a little bit. And then also starting to work with form inputs and using our JavaScript that we learned yesterday to start hooking in and linking our JavaScript to our HTML. So first half of this exercise, we're just going to go through all the layout of everything. We're going to build this page from scratch. And as I'm using CSS properties, I'm hoping to give a kind of a quick description of what they're all doing. So we're going to build out this page. If you would like to follow along, you totally can follow along. If you know you're going to fall behind and get overwhelmed, that is also completely fine. We are officially live on YouTube, which means as soon as I end this meeting, within a couple minutes, the video should be available at the end of class. So you should be able to use that to catch up. If you want to. This is not a homework assignment. This is more of an in-class assignment, just so we can teach through something a little bit more practical. So from there, either for the second half of class tonight, depending on how quickly we get on this, get done this, or starting tomorrow, we are going to build this page. This page is a little reminiscent of a particular news site that I will not name, but it would happen to be, the city that you guys are all based in, .com. For copyright reasons, we will not explicitly mention their name. But the idea here is that we are going to create this page, and we're going to use Bootstrap Grid, but no other components. And so the idea behind this lesson is we start figuring out layout and we start understanding when we can use CSS properties to kind of get exactly what we want. This will be your, I have to double check on this because I didn't know I was teaching until 3 o'clock. But I believe this will be your weekly weekend assignment. So we'll be working on that. And then finally on Thursday, we're going to get to a topic that is near to dear to my heart. This looks like a really basic web page, right? It's just an image, some text, a little tagline. What we are going to do is deploy this to the internet. So on Thursday, we are going to buy a domain name. You can definitely use your stipend for that. A domain name is about $13-ish a year. And everyone is encouraged to get one. It's not an absolute requirement, but I will be going slower on Thursday so everyone can follow along with the steps. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this page, we're going to tweak it so it has your name in it, and we're going to go through all the steps of buying a domain name, setting up a repository for your website, getting GitHub pages set up, and then wiring up that DNS so that your domain knows where your website is hosted. And then we're also going to get an email address forwarding set up for you. So that is where we are at. I am hoping to be able to steamroll after the break right into this news site. I'm so excited about it that the sun has turned me purple again. But with that said, I am going to put out a poll and we can decide whether we want to slow down and make sure everyone is caught up in this JavaScript layout example, or if we want to steamroll into the news site just so we have more time tomorrow to work on that and answer any questions you may have. So before we dive into that, does anyone have any questions while I reach over and close my blinds?
I had a question about the domain.
Shoot.
If we already have some that we haven't used, can we use one of those instead of buying another one? Okay.
Absolutely, not a problem. Whatever one you do end up using, it will be unique to the website. So if you have anything on that domain now, we're going to switch it to whatever site we deploy. But if you already have a domain, It should be fine. The DNS screens that you use to configure it may look a little different. We're going to use a provider called Namecheap.com. It's called a domain registrar. If you have a domain through Google Domains or GoDaddy or any of those, completely fine. You can definitely use that. One thing I would encourage you to do before Thursday's class, twofold actually. One, have a credit or debit card available. Again, .com domain names are only about $13, and that will be reimbursed through your stipend, if you choose to buy that domain name. One, have a credit or debit card available with $13 on it. And then two, search for your domain name in advance. If you can get your first name, last name.com, I would highly encourage you to do that. You don't have to buy it yet. So do not use GoDaddy. GoDaddy is the bane of my existence. I am fully supportive of every other domain registrar. I have a vendetta, a personal hatred against GoDaddy. So we're going to be using Namecheap.com on Thursday. However, if you want to buy your domain name through someone else, that is completely fine. What I am encouraging you to do in advance is just check the availability of it. So you don't need to buy your domain name in advance, but just go to Namecheap.com and there will be a big search box that pops up. And you can type in whatever domain name you would like to buy and check to make sure if it is available. If it's not, go ahead.
I was going to say, if it is available, can you park it? Like,
not worth parking it. The probability of it getting stolen in 48 hours is probably pretty low. We will go through the checkout process on Thursday. However, if you want to be one step ahead, it is completely fine to buy it. Just keep in mind that we're going to be going through using Namecheap, so I would encourage you to buy it there. But the settings are pretty much the same across all the registrars. It's just a matter of being able to find them.
great, thank you.
Yep.
Can I add something, Max?
Yep.
I just want to say too, if you already have one, I put this in chat, but just in case anybody else was thinking about using something they already have, just make sure before Thursday you have access to that. Like you can log in, you know your credentials, because you're going to need to access that domain name wherever you bought it from.
And I believe I saw a question about hosting. We are going to use a free hosting provider. You guys have been introduced to GitHub. We're actually going to be using their hosting, which is completely free to deploy your website. On Thursday, we will do a brief chat about the limitations of GitHub Pages hosting, around static site, WordPress, and other CMSs. However, we will be covering server-side setup and deployments much later in the course. So we will be coming back and revisiting that topic. We'll be using AWS, which is a lot more developer focused in their hosting, more app focused than website hosting based. However, for Thursday's class, we will be using GitHub Pages, and come hell or high water, come 8:30, you're going to have a website online. Ariel, I would just leave it at HostGator. Just keep in mind that if you do decide to use that domain, it is going to overwrite whatever you have linked up at HostGator already. So if you have it at HostGator and it's kind of just parked over there, and you don't have anything else on it, that's completely fine to reuse that domain. Yeah, if it's a WordPress site, that's fine. We're actually going to be changing the DNS settings. So before it even makes it to WordPress and all of that setup, it's going to redirect to GitHub Pages. But as long as it's as long as you don't mind losing access to the WordPress site, that's a completely fine thing to do. Other questions? Who's excited to get back into JavaScript? Woo! Okay. Tonight I am going to try something kind of new. We did it in cohort 2, but I'm sorry, in cohort 1, but I don't think you guys have been exposed to it yet. So what I'm going to do, here is my VS Code, and in best practice form, I've got my week 2 folder open here already. If I go up to File and drop down to Open, I'm going to get my files here. I want to open up whatever my code is. So if you have it on your desktop, that's fine. But we don't want to be in the classroom repository. We want to be in the My Code folder. So I already have week 2 created here. So I am going to create, and this week 2, by the way, is in module 2. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I am going to call it day 2 JS, and I'm going to put today's date on it. All right. And from there, I'm going to create a new file called index.html. Okay, that's going to pop open. And from there, what I can do is I am going to grab a share link and post it into the Zoom chat. Hiding chat on me, I see. Okay. So if you guys pop that open, you should be able to open the workspace. So if you guys are familiar with Google Docs, where if 2 people are in the same document at the same time, you can actually see them type. That is what this feature should be doing. So it may, when you open that link, it may require you to sign in. I would encourage you guys to sign in with your GitHub account, just because I believe everyone already has a GitHub account created. So I'm going to just put hello world into my code editor so you guys can see it. And I'm going to blow it up. And the reasoning that I'm doing this is so when you guys want to reference the code and you go, oh, I want to go see a CSS file, or, oh, I can't see the font, it's not big enough. You guys can open that VS Code link and have access to all the files from there. So let me go back to the live share. Someone talk to me. How are you guys making out? Did someone make it in?
I'm just confused. Are we opening that in our HTML file or just in a separate browser?
No, if you click on that link, what it should do is open in the browser and then pop open your VS Code itself.
I already had my VS Code open, so it popped up in the browser. Should I click get started or join the live share session from the browser?
Either or. You can probably join it from the browser, and that should work fine. The end result here is that you can see my hello world on that link. You may need to open index.html over on the left.
How did you get there? I just missed. I was making my file, so I didn't see what.
Oh,
No problem. If you go, no problem. If you go into the Zoom chat or into the CIC Student C2 Slack channel, there is a link that's to prod.liveshare.this.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. So if you click on that, it should open in your browser.
Yeah.
And then you may have an option to either open it in VS Code or view in browser.
It says join the live share session.
Yep. Go ahead and yep.
Okay.
And I'm seeing you guys coming in on my side, which is, I believe, a good sign.
It says live share extension is not installed. Should I install it?
Yeah, I would encourage you, if you get prompted to install that extension, go ahead and do that.
Okay.
And then once you get through that install, Susan, you may have to click on the link again. Sometimes after the extension installs, it forgets what you were trying to do before that.
says I'm running VS Code outside the applications folder, so we cannot install support, but I can still join manually.
Okay, so that's a different problem. You're
think-
running VS Code, but it didn't get moved into your applications folder. So
Oh.
if you can remind me at the end of class, and I will help you do that.
Okay.
Or the other thing, if you want to try it on your own, if you quit VS Code and then go to your applications folder and just check to see if it's there. If it is there, open it. If it's not there, try and move it in there. And if you need help with that, I can help you at the end of class.
All right. Let me look right now. Thank you.
So Max, I think I'm doing this right, where it opens it up in the browser and then you click to join. And then it asks me to sign in.
Yep. Go ahead and
That's
sign in
okay,
with your
right?
GitHub. Yep.
Although I think, oh, GitHub, not GitCrack. Okay. So where are we at here? We are,
And I'm seeing you guys come in. We've got
It's-
5 of you in
yeah.
here. And this
Do you-
isn't a requirement. You can still follow along in Zoom. This is just going to give you access to the files that I'm writing as I'm writing them.
it's churning. Do you see like that I'm trying to get in, or did I do something wrong?
No, I would go back to your browser and see if you've got
That's-
something new in your browser for you.
Yeah, that's where I am in the browser.
It takes
All right.
like a few seconds to fully load up.
Cause it's like, okay,
Has it been spinning for a while or?
but yeah.
Try
So-
closing it.
So the web one, right? Okay. And then, let's see here.
Corey, I think,
uh,
might have the same issue as you.
So,
Do you want to share your screen and we can take a look?
me or
Sure.
somebody else? Okay.
Looks like Corey and Mel have the same issue, I think.
All
I
stuff
think
on
I'm
that.
having that issue too. I can't log in, or I don't know how to log in.
Okay, let's go to your VS Code, Carolyn.
All right.
Assuming, is it your screen sharing, right? Yeah, okay, sorry. So let's go to your
Yeah,
VS Code.
VS Code. Yeah, I for a second, my English, I was like VS Code and JS Code. All right. And I got to get rid of these.
All right,
Okay,
so
here we
you've
go.
got nothing happening in here. So let's go back to Zoom and click on the link again.
That's a screen. Okay, come on, Zoom.
You may need to get to, do you have chat?
I always get this screen first now.
We can't see
Oh, back
that.
to meeting, never mind. Okay,
And Karen, in answer to your question, you shouldn't, well, if you can type, that's fine. But you don't need to be able to. We'll just be following along with this. Although this feature does support multiple people typing at the same time. I don't know if I have it turned on. And if I don't, I don't want to have it turned on. I believe I have everyone in as
Oh,
read
yeah.
only.
I'm sorry. Let me unshare for a minute, because if I,
You can get to the link in Slack as well. if that's-
yeah, I don't know what's going on with my Zoom now. So, oh, here we go. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing so I don't get in anyone's way. I'll figure this out for a second. Now I have Zoom back.
Yes, Ariel, it will log you out of that share. And then you can always get back into it by clicking on the link that I shared. But every session will be different. So tomorrow night's link will not be the same link. So if all goes well here, we'll just get in the habit of sharing this every night as we're coding. But if I close my window and open up a different one, the link changes for everyone. And
So
VS
if I
Code
click-
should let you have 2 windows open at the same time. So if you go up to File up at the top and drop down to New Window, that will let you have 2 windows open so you can be working on your code and also have my code open. However, if you have joined through the browser, you don't need to worry about that. You'll already have 2 windows. Carolyn, you want to go back to screen sharing?
Yes. Sorry. I found you guys. You're back. All right.
I think I'm in as an anonymous user, but I'm in.
Anonymous user is completely fine. Click on Visual Studio Code. That the middle icon dead center on your screen.
Yeah, I've got this thing in my way though. Can you see it?
No.
It's almost like a splash screen. It's got these big button icons, back to meeting schedule, share screen, join.
You can just close that window.
I'm trying to. Okay, here we go. That menu bar was in. All right, there we go. Yeah, the zoom bar was in the way. Now.
So if you click on Visual Studio Code.
Oh, there we go. All right. Just once or twice.
Once should have done it. Try again. Okay, and then click on Open Visual Studio Code.app.
Okay.
And then in here, go ahead and click Install.
All right. Oh, this toolbar is in the way. Okay, there we go. We work around.
And then install.
Do not sync, just install.
Correct. Okay, and then click on Reload Window and Open. Okay, and then if you click on Files in the top left, hopefully. Nope, it hates you. All right, go ahead and close this window.
It's me.
And we're gonna go click on Visual Studio Code again. It's always bumpy getting this set up, but once it's set up, it is a great learning tool. So go ahead and hit Open Visual Studio Code. Yep. And open. And then you can continue as anonymous there, or if you wanted to sign in, you could. For right now, let's just go for continue as anonymous.
All right, thank you.
And then go ahead and type in your name and hit enter.
Just my regular name?
Yep.
Except I can't spell my name. Sorry.
Then
Here
enter.
we go.
And all right, one more time, we're going to try this. Hit close on this window. Click on the logo, the Visual Studio Code right in the center.
Okay, hold on. All right, here we go.
Open. Open. Continue as anonymous. Enter.
Just the first name then?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh,
All right, we're going to close this and go to the backup. Up at the top, it says join the live share session from the browser preview.
yeah, that's the one I was clicking on before and it was like just spinning. Okay, oh, that's the dictionary. Cut it out. All right.
And then continue as anonymous down in the bottom. Just hit enter there.
Oh, okay, don't sit and wait. All right.
It just takes a second to spin. There you go.
Yeah,
All
see, I
right.
didn't hit enter. That was the thing the last time.
Okay. Anyone else need to screen share?
So I'm in my
Yep.
code,
So-
not mine. Okay.
Correct. So
I just
if I type something here, you can see it as I type it.
But I can't.
What do you mean you can't?
I can't type it.
No, you would have to follow along in your own VS Code.
Okay. but I mean, you're the only one that has write privileges.
Correct. This
okay,
is
got it,
read-only intentionally.
Got it. Oh, yes, yes, I just wasn't sure. Okay, what am I doing?
Max,
Yeah,
should I just open a second VS Code window is what you're saying? Follow you in the collab one and then also have my own?
correct. If you would like to follow along,
Okay.
you know, while we're going through the exercise, this exercise tonight is not a homework assignment. You don't have to turn it in. You do not have to complete this assignment on your own. This is purely just a teaching tool. However, if you would like to follow along with me, that is also completely fine. That is
Karen.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Max. Karen wants to know if you should be able to type. You should not. You should have read-only access.
Correct.
Does
Any
it
other?
matter if I'm logged in the browser? I successfully got in the browser, but I'm just trying to get in through VS Code now. And it's not really, it's just loading forever.
If you've made it in through the browser, that's fine.
Okay.
We can spend time after class if you're stuck getting it working in VS Code. One of those things that it should be working, but it is temperamental to get set up. So we can spend time at the end of class getting that set back up.
I think I figured out one of the problems Caroline was having. So you know how she put in her name and she entered and it disappeared. It's because the second time after you put in your name, you have to actually copy the link into the top.
Yes, and
Yes,
that
yes.
should have just been carrying over from the URL, which is why I was a little confused. But that is another way you can join, is if you just copy and paste it,
Which
you should
link?
be able to get in.
Which link?
The
GitHub?
only
link in
link we have
Slack.
shared, the link in Slack.
Oh, right, gotcha. Okay. So I should be okay to go, right?
Yep,
I
as long
think
as you
can
have
see
it.
everything I have. Oh, no, I stopped sharing.
I stopped your share, yeah. And
Yeah.
Shantina,
So-
installing that live share extension is
there
completely
it is.
fine.
Okay.
And if it asks for sync only, you can just pick the install option. And Karen, that's also completely fine. Following along in Zoom is fine. This gives you more access, makes it easier to see my files as I'm working on them. But this is not a requirement. I will be screen sharing through this. Speaking of which, I should start that screen share again. And I will not add this file to GitHub after class because it is already in there. Cool. Any other questions? Okay. This is the most prepared for class I have been anytime I am teaching. I not only have tonight's curriculum all planned out, I have tomorrow's curriculum all planned out, and I have a video already up on YouTube for Thursday from when I taught this at a Hack Upstate workshop. So in case you couldn't tell, I'm super proud to share the plan for the next 3 days. But with that said, let's get to work here. So what I am going to do is, in the sake of time and trying to get us to a break by 7 o'clock, I am going to use the shortcut here. So I have, if I go back to my files over here, I've already created my index.html, and I've created that in my day 2 folder that I've already created. So I'm going to save that, and because I made this a .html file, it knows that I'm writing HTML in here, right? So I'm going to use the shortcut of using an exclamation mark and then hitting tab, and I get all of my lovely template for me, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll just change this and I'll call this JS Playground. And I'm going to drop down into my body. And there are 2 files that I want to get set up before I get out of my head. So I'm going to go over to new file, and I'm going to create style.css. And I won't put anything in there yet, but I'm going to pop back over here. And what tag am I going to use?
Wait, what was the question? What are you trying to do?
What tag am I going to put in to link my CSS to my HTML?
Link.
Link. You got it. And the first property I'm going to use is
Rel.
CSS dot,
rel. And
Rel
what is my
equals-
rel value?
right.
Style
href,
CSS.
The rel is actually style sheet. So
Just style
that is how the browser knows what I'm passing in. And then I also have to tell it where to go find it. And that is just going to be my style.css.
The name of it.
Then the other thing I'm going to pull in is what we started experimenting with, which is this normalize.css. And this normalizes like our CSS reset, right? It's going to override any of the browser defaults and let us just play with our own. So I'm going to go to, I just did a Google search for normalized CSS. I get this file, I hit download. I'm going to hit Command A and copy, and then go back into my VS Code and paste that in there. All right. Now I need to go back into my HTML and I need to include that as well. So I'm going to do my rel style sheet and do my href and point that at normalize.css, and we're good to go.
Wow.
So while I'm here, I'm going to right click over here and I am going to open with, and it should decide to not work on me. So I'm going to instead click reveal in Finder, and that pops this open. And if I just double click on the file, it should open up this white page. Why is it white?
Because you basically blew out all the code with normalize.
Yeah, not only did we blow it all out with normalize, there's nothing in it in the first place. Look, our body element's completely empty. There's nothing in there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in the word hi. I'm going to
Either
come
that
back.
or it's snow. Sorry.
Going to come back over here. I'm going to refresh and we get hi showing up. And I even know my normalize is working because you see how that is all the way up at the border. The browser has padding built into it. So that must mean that my normalize is working. So I'm going to do one more thing, and I want to make sure my style is working. So I'll just do a body and I'll do a color of red and refresh, and it turned red. So, okay, great. I know I've got that linked up as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my index.html, and we are going to get this out of the way. So I'm going to use this as kind of my mock-up, right? Or my wireframe. We're going to be going off this finished design and be recreating it. So starting up at the top of the page, I have some title, right? So what element would I use? What HTML tag would I use to get that to show up?
H1.
Yep. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do my H1 and I'll say JS Playground. And I'm going to save that. I'll pop back over to my Chrome tab. I'll refresh, and there it is. Now, what do we notice about this compared to this?
The font size is smaller.
What do we notice now, this compared to this?
Now it's not centered.
Correct. Okay, so how would we center that? Let's take it a step back. Where would we put the code to center that? So Mel, yep, text align, and we're going to do that in our style sheet. So we're going to come over here. The problem is that we don't want to target the H1 itself, right? We want to target the thing around the H1. So if we go back, well, we don't want to center the entire body. We kind of want some notion of. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a, instead of doing a div, we're going to call it header, right? Just be a little bit more descriptive.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to put this down here. I'm going to make sure my indentation is right. All that looks good. So I'm going to jump back over to my style sheet, and now I can target my header. Now I'm not using a pound or a period or a hashtag or anything like that, because I am targeting this header element itself. I'm not targeting a class on the header. I'm not targeting an ID on the header, just the header. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to text-align, and I'm going to not be able to spell center. I'm going to save. And again, these little things, you notice how that turned green? That is Visual Studio Code going center. I know what center is. I understand that property. So I'm going to hop back over here. I refresh, and we're centered. All right. I don't know. We could be a fifth the way there. We're making good progress. Keep up the steam. So we've got our header here, and this may be a little hard to see. I'm going to drag this out. So what do you notice about our header design-wise? So thinking kind of outside of the code, what would you say if you were describing that header to someone that you noticed about it?
It's bold. I don't
I'm sorry,
know-
not the header, the nav bar. That's what I
Oh,
meant
I'm
to say.
sorry. It's just there.
So Brandy says equal spacing, and equal
Oh, yeah.
spacing means
Yeah.
that it has to be something between them, right? So the first thing that I see about this header is, or I'm sorry, about this nav, I should call it the nav because that's what it is. It is broken into 3 sections. So the first thing I want to do is get my 3 sections just showing up. From there, I then can go in section by section and get the styling right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back over to my code. I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new component called nav, right? A new tag. And from there, I am going to do a div. And the first div, I'm going to just say logo. Then I'm going to create another div in there and call it links. And then I'm going to get my third div in there and call it search. Okay. I'm going to hop back over here. I'm going to refresh, and there they all are. So what do we do from there? How do we get these showing up as 3 evenly spaced things?
You have to link them in your CSS.
Yeah, I need to do something in the CSS. I'm definitely going to be using some selectors there. Flex, you got it. Both Dominique and Mel. Good. So we're going to target our nav. And in our nav, we are going to say display. And then we're going to say flex. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. Awesome. That is a step in the right direction, right? So now what do we need to do?
Align content center.
We don't actually want to center it. We want to do the justify the space between. So the reason we don't want to center it is because we only want links to be in the center, right? And we want search to be on the right, and we want logo to be all the way on the left. So the first thing we're going to do is just get it so there is space between them, right? And so we lean into our flex box and we say, hey, align content, right? And the easiest way to start remembering these selectors and these properties and their values is just thinking about, oh, I would like to align the content. How would I like to align it? Well, I would like to align it so there is space between it. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh, and it's going to do nothing. Why isn't it doing anything?
You have to connect it to the HTML document.
It's already connected to the HTML, right? Because our nav is in
Yeah,
here, and we
right.
know our header is centered.
It's not like a column.
So what we actually have to do
Is it
is
flat?
tell the items in this nav, hey, you need to flex, right? The parent of the nav has been told, hey, take up the whole space. Any child that you display in here, use the flex property. But we haven't told the children, hey, you are flex children. You have this property called flex on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop back over here, and we're going to say, hey, go look at the nav again, but look at the div inside the nav, right? That's what that less than sign means. Greater than sign means. So we're going to target any divs that are inside the nav, right? So if we look at our HTML, here's our nav, and we're going to target all 3 of these divs. And what we're going to do is we're going to say flex 1. So they're all know, hey, flex is coming your way. You are in, your parent is a display flex. So that's what you should be using to determine your layout. So we come in here, we refresh, and all of a sudden we're making progress. Right now it goes, oh, align content space between, because I know all 3 children are that flex property, I can get that space in between them.
Can you explain to me then again now? This is what got me tripped up on the homework. The header with the curly brackets and the nav with the curly brackets, and then the nav telling the div what to do. Does that mean the header and the nav are parents? Is that what that's telling me?
So header is the parent of H1.
Okay.
Nav is the parent of the divs.
Okay.
So these 3 divs are children of the nav.
Yep.
And so when we go back to our CSS, we have our regular nav. So that's just targeting the parent. But down here, we're targeting the children.
So you use the arrow when you're talking to the child of whatever, anything. Doesn't have to be the nav. Okay. So the arrow is talking to the child. When you use the curly brackets, it's the parent.
Yeah. So, well, you always use the curly.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So yeah, when you don't have the arrow.
So if I take this out and hit save and refresh, you notice it still works, right? And because it is entirely fine for me to just target the children directly. The downside to that is I want to use divs somewhere else in my page, and I don't want all my divs to flex. And so what we're doing is, this is the selector, right? What it is doing, it is selecting your HTML elements so you can target that styling. And so what we're doing here is, instead of just targeting every div on the page, we are only targeting the children div of nav.
So what if you have multiple navs and multiple divs? That's where it would get confusing, right?
Yeah, and so that's when you start adding classes so you can target things directly.
Okay.
I have a question. Would you ever use the reverse, the greater than or the less than symbol in this context? Like, could you do the child would act on the parent?
I'm
So you'd have-
pretty sure the answer is no. I think it is a
Okay.
requirement of CSS that you start at the top and work your way down.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that, Caitlin.
What was the question?
Have you ever done this, which is basically no. See, that doesn't work. Yeah.
No, and this is why indentation matters too in your code, because that's how you figure out what's the child of what and what's the parent of what.
Yes. So if we go back over here, you see how all of these are indented one level further over. That's a great point, Caitlin.
Yeah.
That's helping us figure out, oh, nav is the parent, and we know that these are the children because they are in between the 2 nav tags.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is, could you put div less than nav and it would kind of be the same thing?
No, you cannot.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Nope, the parent has to come first.
Yes. Okay, so let's jump back over here. We're making progress. What do you notice now, just looking at the nav and probably more the layout of the nav? What is the difference between this, which we're aiming for, and this?
It's not centered or right
Yep.
aligned.
So,
The
yep,
search needs to
exactly.
go to the right.
So let's do the links first. If we're looking at this, how do we get our link centered?
Our link?
What's that?
You said the link or?
Yeah, how do we get the link centered?
Great.
So Mel, you're on the right track. If we go over to our CSS, we only have our nav div, right? And that is targeting all 3 divs. So we need a way in our CSS to be able to target just that div that we're talking about. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we are going to add a class called links. And when I hop back over to my CSS, oh, nope, not my normalized, my style.css, I can now target my links. Now, why did I use a period and not a hashtag?
Because it's not an ID.
Exactly.
Class.
Yep, we're targeting the class. So we are going to text align again, and center it. So we're going to come over here, we're going to refresh, and our links are now centered. So we just rinse and repeat. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to do a class. I'm going to search. I'm going to do my search, and I am going to text align right.
Okay.
And now we've got it over on the right. All right, so we're making good progress. I actually think we've got everything laid out the way we want it to, right? So now we can start going in and talking about content. So let's start with our center, because I think that is the most layout intensive thing we have left to do. And then the rest of it is just elements we're going to get in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back over here, right? And because I'm adding content, not just styling, I'm doing that over my HTML, not in my CSS. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do 3 A tags. I will do home, about, and contact.
Okay.
What's an
All
A
right.
tag?
A tag is an anchor tag. I don't no idea why they call it an anchor tag. It is a link essentially. So that's what makes it show up as blue and makes it so I would be able to click on it. A tags almost always have an href on them, just like our link tags do. So that would make us, if we wanted to link home to say Google, we could add an href to google.com. And when I come over here and refresh, now when I click on home, it's going to take me over to Google.
Oh, okay.
But we're going to take the href out just for this example. Okay, and so we've got our home, about, contact. What do we notice difference here compared to here? Other than they aren't blue and underlined because I didn't put in
They need
hrefs.
to be spaced more evenly to fit the grid.
Yep, exactly. So I'm going to hop back to my CSS. And how am I going to space them?
Space
between.
around.
Line equals justified?
So we are going to space around, but before we can space around, where did what do we have to, nope, we already did, sorry. I'm cheating and referencing the code I've already written. So we have our links and we have it text align centered. But in order to use space around, what kind of property is space around?
Flex. So you have to flex the links.
Which is, we're flexing again on the parent component, so we can use the advantages of flex on the children element, right? So, all right, great. We've now displayed flex. Now, if I refresh over here, okay, it's kind of in the right direction, right? But what do we need to do? We flexed on the parent. Now we need to tell the children you're flexed, right? So I'm going to do a new links and I'm going to target the A tag because the A tag are the children of the class links. And so we're going to come back over here and we're going to flex 1 and save and refresh. And we're making good progress. All right. Now let's figure out where we want to go from here. We've got these all working. Let's go back and let's get our search working, and then we can get our finish up with our logo. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop over here, and we're not actually going to need to do a ton of styling here. All we are going to do is in our search, we are going to create, we're going to use a new tag called input. And we have to tell it what kind of input is it. So you get all of these options in here, right? You could make it a button or a checkbox or a date or anything like that. But we're just going to go for just plain old text. And then in our input, we can put a little placeholder message in there. That placeholder, you see how it says search in here? That's the placeholder. So we're going to do a little placeholder of search. And then we will finish that off and hit save. Come over here, refresh, and we've got a search icon or a search bar. Okay, well, search bars are great, but they need a button so you can click on something to get that search to work. So I'm going to pop over here. Anyone guess what we're going to use?
Input, no button.
We're going to use button. And for the button, we need to tell it, hey, this button is going to be a submit button. It's going to do something when we click on submit. And what we will do is we'll just type in, submit. We save, we refresh, and we've got our submit button there. All right, we are cooking with gas, people, and we're 7 minutes ahead of schedule. All we have to do, add in our logo as well. So you notice what we have up here is the logo, and we have the business name. So let's get in the image, let's get in the business name, and then let's talk about how we can get them up on the same line. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll up here, and in our logo, what tag am I going to use to get an image to show up?
Image source?
IMG.
Yep, IMG and our source. And the source that I am going to use, I'm going to cheat. I already have a URL copied and pasted. I just went on Unsplash and grabbed an image. And so this is the super long image tag here with just the source in it. And I'm going to come over here and whoa, that's a big picture. Okay, so we want to size that down. How do we do that?
Targeted in the CSS.
Exactly. So in order to target it in the CSS, now I could target this image by saying, look at the nav, look at the div, and look at any image. Or I could just put an ID on it that says logo image. And the reason I like to be specific is you notice I didn't just call it logo, because there are times that you will have a parent that contains the logo. So I like to be specific in my naming and say, this is the actual image that we are targeting here. And so that's why I call it logo image. So we're going to pop back over here. We're going to do our logo image. Scaring me that hasn't turned green or turned yellow yet, but we'll figure out why in a second. Okay, and what do we want to do? What are we styling? Width and height, yeah. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put in a max width, which means don't get any bigger than this size. So instead of dictating a width, which in this scenario we could totally do, I'm just going to say, hey, don't get any bigger than 50 pixels. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over to here. I'm going to refresh. We're making good progress. We've got our image in there. Okay. So last thing we want to do before the break is we want to get our text in there. So how do we get text in HTML?
Paragraph tag.
Trick question, but yes, we are going to start with the paragraph tag and get to why that was a trick question. Okay, and what we are going to do is we're going to type in company, just so we have something. We're going to refresh, and we got our company underneath. Now, lots of different ways we can get company up on this line. What is the way that we have covered so far? Flex, exactly. So we could totally flex that up there. And in fact, flex would probably be more powerful because we could choose, do you want it up here? Do you want it in the center? Do you want it at the bottom? Right? We get lots of options there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our inspect tools, and I'm going to pop this open. And you see down in these dev tools, it says display block. A block is by default going to take up the whole space that it can. So this block, you notice when I highlight over it, you see it's the full width, right? P tags always show up as blocks. Now, if we go up to our image and click on it, and we do a search, a filter for, I'm going to switch to the computed tab and go down here, and you see this display. Now it's displaying inline. and that's on our image. So if we hover over that, you notice the image isn't like the block, it's not spanning the full width. You notice that blue area isn't all the way across, but if we go down to our P tag, it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over here. Does anyone know the inline version of a P tag?
ER?
No, it is actually a span. So we want to make sure we span the opening and the closing tag. And when we pop over here and refresh, all of a sudden it's up on that line. Now, the only reason it is up on that line is because this is in line and this is in line. So to prove that, if I come over here, I can override anything. So I'm going to go into my image that I have selected. And if I display block that, notice what it did to my text. It bumped it right back down there. So we've covered 3 different display properties. We've covered block, which defaults to full width, and P tags are always defaulting to block. We've covered span inline tags, which we use span for. And then we've covered flex, which is, hey, I'm really flexible here. You tell me where you want me to go, and I'll figure out the spacing around it. So what I'm going to do is just show you an alternative. If I go, I want that P tag there. I don't want it to be a span. I am being stubborn and I want to use a P tag.
Okay.
What we can do is if I come over here, refresh, we've got that P tag back down there, but we can override any of that. So if I come in here and I put ID of this on company name, and then hop into my style sheet and target my company name, I can say, screw you, display inline. And my CSS is going to cascade over the browser default and put it up there. And we can prove that that is working because if I click on here and target it, you see my CSS that I wrote, my company name, that it is displayed inline, and it even tells me what line number, 31, that is targeting that. All right, so we made a nav bar. I've got 2 more minutes, so I'm going to get fancy, and I'm going to put a border at the bottom of it. So when we come back from break, we can dive into getting our content down here and start playing around with some JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to come over here, and you notice this black line showing up. That's just my border, right? So in my border, I have on my entire nav. So I'm going to go over to my border. I'm going to go, I'm sorry, to my CSS. I'm going to go into my nav, and I'm going to say border. Now, borders are super flexible. They take all kinds of properties. How thick do you want it? Do you want it to be a dotted border or a solid border? What color do you want the border to be? So what we do is we say 1px. That's also sometimes called a hairline border because it looks like just like a line, right? So I'm going to say 1px. I'm going to tell it I want it to be solid and I want it to be black. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. And I got my border, but I got it everywhere. So what I want to do is come back in here and go, no, I just want the border on the bottom. So I'm going to refresh, and I get my border on the bottom. Now, this is great, but what do you guys notice the difference between this and this, other than the fact that the links aren't blue?
Go back to the first one, please. Okay.
There's more space between the line and the company name above it.
Yep. And where else is there space?
On the side.
On the side. And so those
on
little
the padding.
Things, yes, exactly. We're going to use that padding. But you see those little things where if you loaded this site in your browser, you would be like, that's not right. You couldn't tell me why it's not right, likely, but you'd be like, something's not right. The eye naturally reads white space just as much as it reads the content. And so that white space that we get by default from the browser, we overwrote with normalize because we said, browser, you're being too helpful. Don't add in any spacing there. And sometimes you want that flexibility. So what we're going to do is we are going to say, I want the padding everywhere, right? I'm going to want it outside the nav. I'm going to want it everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come all the way up to the top, and I'm going to target my body tag and add back in my padding of 15px. And that padding is now going to get added, no, to the borders, right? And so now all of a sudden things are breathing a little bit more. I'm just going to zoom out one level so they look like each other. Okay, that's all great, but someone noticed there's more space here than there is here. And you know what? That kind of looks right? Like that spacing is good. So how are we going to get that spacing there?
Add a span tag
Margin.
after the word company.
That is a hacky way of doing it, and I would
Ew.
not encourage you to do it. So
Okay.
whenever you are working in styling, it is 98% of the time better to do it in your CSS than it is to add additional elements just so you have your styling.
Got it.
How about margin?
Yeah, so that is what we don't want to do, and let's figure out why. So margin, we're going to put on the nav, right? So I'm going to do a margin bottom, and I'm going to do 10px, and then I'm going to just jump into my HTML, and outside my nav, I'm just going to get us set up for the next section that we're going to be working on, which is our main, and I'll do a p tag of hello, just so we can see what's underneath it. And if I remember to click on the right one and I refresh, notice we got some padding down here, but we didn't in here. What is the difference between margin and padding?
I'm assuming now like margin is going to be outside the content and it's going to push everything else away.
Exactly.
And then
So padding, the order that it goes is you've got your content itself, then you've got your padding, then you've got your border, and then you get your margin outside of that. And that is called the box model. And the reason we can remember that is if we pop this open and scroll down to the bottom here, you notice Chrome is helping us out here. And they're saying, look, this is the size of your content. Here's the padding on it. And you can even see it's highlighting it. Here's the border, that one little thin line. And then here's your margin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over here, and instead of margin bottom, I'm going to do my padding bottom. Save, refresh, come over here. Now we've got some content breathing.
So could you also put, to use margin, could you also put the margin on the top of the body instead?
You absolutely could. But you're not going to get that breathing room on the line, right? The only way to push the line down is to use padding on the nav bar component. But if you wanted this hello to be lower, you could either add a margin bottom on the nav, or you could add a margin top on the p tag or the main tag.
Right. I meant the border is right now at the bottom of the nav. So if you took the border and the padding out of the nav and put it at the top of the,
yes,
made a border on the top of the body and then used a margin instead, a top margin on the body.
Yes, that would also work.
Okay.
All right. I went a couple minutes over. How are we feeling? This a good review for everyone?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
Yeah,
All right.
it makes it all kind of, it makes sense, like all the parts that are floating around. It's like, okay, they're right here. Thank you.
So what we are going to do when you get back is we are going to get this image to show up. We're going to get this text box in here. We're going to talk about how we would get this over here, just as one more review. We're going to talk about how to get this on top of this, as opposed to right next to it. And then we're going to dive into our JavaScript. And so for our JavaScript, we're going to hook into this search value, and talk about how we can access our HTML through our JavaScript. And then we'll also hook into it down here as well. And we're going to show you two different ways of hooking in. One in our HTML saying, hey, go look in our JavaScript. And the other way also happening, saying, hey, JavaScript, go look at our HTML. So that is a preview of as what is to come. I'm going to take a break now. We will recoup at 7:20. Does that work for everyone? 15-minute break. And I will see you guys all at 7:20. And I will be here to answer questions and regret my life decisions of drinking coffee at 7 o'clock at night.
Oh, I feel you there. I actually do have a question. It's not, I don't know, it kind of is related, but not really. So how many so I don't even know how to ask the question. So you know how you open the HTML and then we added the normalized CSS and we added CSS and then JavaScript. How many of those files, I guess, can we add to the original file?
A lot. And I don't know that there is a specific limit.
Okay, I was just wondering if there was a limit.
Yeah. However, you do want to be careful because every one you add in there, if you remember back to my terrible iPad drawing where there were arrows going everywhere, every time that you add another tag in there, that is another arrow going back to the server to go load that file. And so it is generally considered best practice there's it's called a build process that takes all of your CSS files and before you deploy it out to the internet, pulls all of them in together and just builds them into one CSS file.
Okay, perfect. So it just combines them all together so it's easier to read for the computer.
For the browser, yeah.
Browser. Oh.
And the other term that you may hear with that is called a minified file, where, you know, we're putting in line breaks and we're putting in spaces in between things. But the browser doesn't really care about all of that, right? So when you're talking about the smallest file size possible, every space matters. And so if I pull up a site, let's just go to Google and I view the page source. First of all, this is all minified code, right? A developer isn't writing all of this without any line breaks. But if I try and find one of their bad example, try Amazon. Oh, come on. Try my company website.
Sorry for asking such a hard question.
Well, I sometimes they get so fancy. So if I look in our head tag, you'll see in here we use jQuery, and this is, you can do this for CSS just like you can with JavaScript and vice versa. But you see it says .min.js. If we open that file, you'll notice that it loads without any spaces. And that's because it is the build process before you deploy the site that's shrinking your code down to the smallest possible file that the browser can still understand.
So does that automatically happen, or do we manually have to make it smaller?
Yeah, so the way you guys are writing CSS files right now, the files are so small anyway, you don't have to worry about that. But when you guys get into React, you'll be using a technology called Webpack under the hood, which is getting super technical and we won't do a deep dive into. But when you build that React app, when you go, hey, I've got all my code, I'm ready to go build this so I can deploy it somewhere, that build process will automatically do that for not only your CSS, but also your JavaScript.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And then I have one more question. It's not really related to this at all. Just because my Git Kraken trial expired, and they did email me saying that they have like a promotion. It ends tomorrow. I was just wondering, should I upgrade it or?
No, because you guys should all get access to the GitHub student pack. And that will have GitKraken included. Karen is on the call and I don't mean to offend her, but GitKraken isn't my personal favorite Git client. I spend most of my time using the Git client built into my code editor. With that said, GitHub Desktop and SourceTree are two other options that you can look into. And both of them are free out of the box. So you don't have to get the student license or anything like that.
What was the first one? I'm sorry, you said GitHub and then SourceTree?
GitHub Desktop.
Okay.
And then SourceTree, spelled exactly how you would think it would be. Those are the other two. GitHub Desktop, I've heard from people that it is more simple and that has made it easier to understand it. SourceTree is a little bit more advanced out of the box, but if you have those Git concepts in your head of like, what am I trying to do? I need to pull before I can push and all of that kind of stuff. SourceTree is actually the one that I use in conjunction with my code editor. So next year, we may use GitHub Desktop instead, only because it's free out of the box. But those are options that you can try. If you like GitKraken, by all means, continue to use it.
I don't. I hate out of all of the apps that we've downloaded, I cannot stand GitKraken.
I personally am the same way. It is a very opinionated thing. Some people and by the way, the reason that Karen recommended GitKraken is because she tried to use SourceTree with her boss, and her boss was like, I don't get this. Like, I don't understand what is happening with Git. Like, he was trying to learn Git through SourceTree and just couldn't wrap his head around it. And so he got into GitKraken and something clicked and he got it. So it is not other than their pricing thing, which is the reason why I would push us over to GitHub Desktop. It is totally a personal preference thing. There, you will have instructors who use Git solely through the terminal, and they don't like a UI. They like operating through there. It is totally personal preference. Whatever you pick is completely fine. I would encourage you though to play around with the tools and find which one you like, because it is good practice to commit your code in addition to submitting it through Google Classroom when it's an assignment.
Yeah, I've been playing around with GitKraken and I don't know what it is. I've been watching YouTube videos. I just can't, doesn't work in my brain.
Join the club.
But it sounds like really stupid, but like so far, just because I have backup stuff to GitKraken, but because I wasn't comfortable with it, I actually backed up our homework of the wireframe into a Google Doc, which I know is like probably like, don't do that. That's, I don't know, but it was just because like, I don't know, GitKraken just frustrates me and I can't wrap my head around it.
And that's
YouTube videos.
That's completely fine. Brandy, you asked if you can delete it. I would say don't delete it until you find an alternative. So try GitHub Desktop, try SourceTree, try just using Git through VS Code. If you find one of those that you like more, then definitely delete GitKraken and just use that one. If you are finding all of them to be frustrating, the problem is probably not with the user interface you're using. The problem is probably wrapping your head around the Git concepts themselves. And so the notion of like, what is a commit actually doing? What is the order that I am supposed to be? You know, I stage through an add and then I commit and then I pull and then I push. And what are all of those things doing? So if you're still wrestling with that, feel free to reach out for either more Git resources or rewatch that class, or look at that diagram again and feel free to like circle things and be like, I don't get why we have to do this, or, you know, why is this a step or whatever it is, but totally free to go out and explore other Git UIs, user interfaces, find whatever one works for you. For the code editor, we will probably be a little bit more heavy-handed with VS Code and saying like, don't explore yet, even though most of the instructors actually code day-to-day in a different code editor called WebStorm or whatever variant it is. It's a professional tool. It's considered a very heavy tool. It is the most expensive code editor on the market, and there is a reason for that. It is one of the only paid code editors on the market, at least popular ones. With that said, almost all the instructors agree that VS Code is the right starting place.
I really like VS Code so far.
Yeah, and it's very lightweight and it doesn't get a lot of things in your way. We also tried 4 or 5 live share, like so you can watch the instructor as they're typing and jump around. And VS Code hands down does it the best once you get it set up. I know the onboarding process is painful, but we will actually be using that so you guys can access the server that I'm running on my local laptop. You guys will be able to access that through your computers as well. And that is all through VS Code. So really cool stuff in VS Code. Have nothing against it. I know of at least one instructor who uses VS Code full time in their day-to-day coding.
My cousin uses VS Code in his full-time job. He works for Sidearm, and they use VS Code over there. And so whenever I have questions, I've been picking his brain. But I like VS Code so far. It's very easy to maneuver around and figure things out.
Yeah, absolutely nothing wrong with VS Code, and nothing wrong with Git Kraken either. You know, it is for some people it clicks and other people it doesn't. So there's, if you would like to jump ship to a different tool, completely fine to do, and you can delete Git Kraken. With that said, if you are liking Git Kraken, I'm going to ping Jesse right now about getting you access to the GitHub Student Pack, which has a ton of freebies in it with different software. So I'm going to do that right now before I forget. Feel free.
I was just about to do that, but do you want to post in the instructors channel along with possibly a solidifying an option for a Git UI so that everybody's on the same page for future modules? Or is that a discussion we should have offline?
Probably a discussion we should save for Friday around the Git UI.
Okay.
But if you could post the question and just tag Jesse about getting student pack access, that would be great.
Yep, I will do that. I don't remember having to do anything special. I just put my regular email in and said it was careers and code, but I don't know if Jesse did something first. So
yeah, I think he's got to either share the invite link or copy students' emails in. But I'm sure he'll know what the next steps are there, and it's probably a 10-minute thing for him to set up.
Got it, sweet.
Are you open for another question? Or are you still on that topic?
For you, no.
Sorry.
Just kidding.
That's
Go ahead.
not nice. I'm gonna be your boss someday. It had to do with the Free Code Academy, getting to lesson 6 in the JS stuff, and it's like
do you want to share your screen and let's work through it?
You will do that. All right. First of all, share my screen. Then I just got to pull it up here. Hold on a second. Which screen that was that I had. Where'd you go?
So if you scroll down on this one and go to expand courses, right in the center of the screen, now towards the top, and then scroll down and click on understanding case sensitivity. Or uninitialized variables, whatever, what's 6? That's
this
6.
is the one. This is the one.
Okay.
First of all, I wasn't quite sure exactly what they were I mean, I understand camel casing and renaming variables to like a variation, but I wasn't quite sure what they were looking for. And so I was trying these different things and it didn't like them. So I guess I don't quite get the point of this one.
Yeah, so this is kind of twofold. So first of all, you see a red squiggly?
Mhm.
Red squigglies normally don't mean a good thing. And so if we hover over that, it might show you the error. It also might not.
Okay, I'm using the touchpad, so would it show it down in the console or?
Just leave your mouse over it. No, it's not going to do
It's a
it. Okay, never
touchpad,
mind.
yeah.
So what do we know about strings? How do we get a string? How do we assign a value into a string?
It should be in quotes, and I did try that.
Okay, so go ahead and put that in quotes. Okay, and hit run the, okay, now it says, you know what, let's hit reset all code over on the left underneath run the tests. And I just want to make sure we're starting from where, go ahead and click
Okay.
that.
So it's not going to reset the stuff I've completed just in this.
Just this challenge.
Okay, excellent. I wasn't sure. Reset this lesson. Yes. I was
Okay.
wondering.
We got way off track here. And so it says in the assignment, modify the existing declarations and assignments so their names use camel case. Do not create any new variables. So
I see.
We want to stick to as closely as possible what Free Code Camp gave us. So up at the top, those declarations, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got a Studley cap var, right? Mm-hmm. And that's all different. So what we want to do is we want to camel case it. And so if we look at line 3, we've got a good example of what camel case looks like. Mm-hmm. So in line 2, go ahead and camel case that. So it has all the same letters, just in the correct case.
So that's all there is to this exercise?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm good. I guess that I deleted all that. So they help you by giving you like a
starting point.
Skeleton working, but I would drop down from line 9 to start doing that, correct? I wouldn't go up.
No, you want to edit that code that they already gave you.
Oh, so line 7, 8, and 9, I would actually go and edit those lines.
As you would with line 2 and 4.
Because those aren't right either. Okay, I get it. I'm good. I just was like, huh? All right, thank you.
No problem.
Awesome. You unshared me, right?
I did.
Thank you.
Oh, what's sound on?
All right, how are we feeling? It looks like we've got most people back. Feeling like we're making good progress. Any questions looking over what we have done so far? Okay, well, let's jump back into it. Carolyn, if you hit Control and Command and then space all at the same time, it will open up the emoji picker, and then you can pick an emoji from there.
Thank you. So Command, space, Alt?
Control, Command, and space.
Control, Command, and space. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so let's jump down here. we've got another image tag that we want to put in. And we've already done an image, but you know, just for the practice, I'm going to come down to my main and I'm going to do an image, and my image has to have a source. And so I'm going to cheat again and pull in a URL that I already have. Okay, and we're gonna save, we're gonna refresh, and we get really big tiger. So we need to shrink that down. So in order to shrink it down, we need a selector that we can target it with. So I'm going to do a class of tiger, and instead of just calling it tiger, because we may have more tiger related things on this page, I'm going to call it tiger image. I'm going to pop over here. I'm going to do my tiger image, and I am going to say max width, and we'll say 300 px. And I'm going to save. I'm going to refresh, and I've got a smaller tiger. All right, good. Making progress. So I also want to put a question that says, do you like this photo? So we are going to use a special tag called a label tag. And the label is labeling the input that's about to come. And we are going to label it, do you like this photo? And while I'm in here, instead of showing every line that we're doing, I'm also going to do an input tag, and the type is going to be text, and and we will save that and refresh on the right window, and we get, do you like this photo? And that is right there. Okay, that's not exactly where we wanted it, right? We want it down here. So there are multiple ways we can go about fixing that. Does someone want to take a stab at one of them?
We can do flex.
Yep, we could flex it. I'm going to skip that option for now, probably because it is the more advanced one. So does anyone have a better suggestion? I'm sorry, not better, a different suggestion.
Using the P tag.
Using the P tag for sure. Yeah, so let's come down here. And what I could do is I could make this label a P tag instead. And refresh on the right one. And I got my line down there, right? And so what is special about that P tag? What is the display property?
It's block.
Block, exactly. Block's what is getting me down there. But because we are using a input here, we're going to use a new thing that we haven't seen yet. I'm going to switch this back to label. And I'm going to wrap all of this in what is called a form tag. And that form tag is going to give us more flexibility to be able to target some of the functionality of this form, right? And a form is anything really that has a input in it. So it's going to fight me, but that's fine. We'll let it be for now. I'm going to refresh. And okay, now that form, this whole form is showing as a block, right? Which is why these two are together, but they're not up here because this is inlined, right? So this whole form is now become a block. And so if I click on it, we see our form and we see form display block. Okay, that's all great, but I want to get this down to the next line. So we could go back and make this a P tag, but label tags are unique. They have some functionality that we're going to hook into a second. So I don't want to change the label, but there are two things I could do to get this onto the next line. What could I do?
Break BR?
Yes, that is not always a commonly used option anymore, but we can force a line break. So I put in that little line break, and it's a self-closing tag, right? It has that slash there because there's no content with the break. But when I refresh, that line break is shoving this down onto the next line. What is the other way we could get it to look exactly like this?
Padding?
Top
Nope.
position fixed or relative or whatever, and then using top.
That is a option that I did not think of that could totally work, that I would not encourage you to do.
Yeah.
But that is totally an option and that would work. What I would suggest that you could also do is if I take out this BR tag, it's going to put it back up where we don't want it. But there's nothing saying we can't go into our style and say, hey, look at the form. And in the form, look for the label. And hey, look, I know the browser displays it as inline by default, but I want you to display it as a block tag instead. And so when I refresh over here, that also puts it down onto that next line, right? So just because an element like a span tag by default will display inline, or just because a p tag by default will display as a block, doesn't mean we can't go into our CSS and go, caution to the wind, I'm telling you, display it as whatever we want, and that is totally an option. Okay, so we have all the content out on this page that I want. However, we want to start covering all of that fun JavaScript stuff that we got into yesterday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back over to my code, and I'm going to create a new file called script.js. What you name the file is not important. The .js is important. That is telling the browser and our file editor, hey, we're going to give you some JavaScript. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out a console.log special syntax that is telling the browser, hey, put whatever's in my parameters, in my parentheses, put that out into the console. And what I'm going to do is I can console log variables. I can console log out a string, a Boolean, a number, whatever we covered yesterday. So I'm going to console log out my hello world. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go over to my browser. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to look at my console, and I got nothing. Why don't I have anything? Because just like our CSS, when we create our CSS file, we've got to tell our HTML, go run our JavaScript. So I'm going to pop back over here. Script tags are generically put all the way at the bottom, either right inside the end body tag or at the right in between the body and the HTML. The reasoning behind that is because we want our JavaScript to run after everything else is loaded, right? So we don't want to say, hey, go load all the content, but then go load the JavaScript and don't show any of the content until the JavaScript is loaded. That's generically what we don't want, right? We want our content to show up, and then we want our interactivity to load on top of that. So that's why it normally goes at the bottom. There are exceptions to that rule. So I'm going to use my source tag, and I'm going to say source is script.js. And this is a little weird. The script tag isn't self-closing. Most browsers will read a self-closing script tag and be fine with it. But there are some older browsers, Internet Explorer, that does not like a self-closing script tag. So we just leave that tag there. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to pop back over to Chrome. I'm going to refresh, and we got our hello world in the console. All right, we're right in JavaScript. How we feeling? We excited? We want to get into the document object model and start editing stuff? No, only me excited about that. Okay, it's fine. I'll take my excitement. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to take out our console log because console logs are cool. But what we want to do is start interacting with our HTML in our JavaScript. So we're going to use a const because we're gonna not change what this variable is referencing, and we're going to call this const my heading. And what do we want to set my heading to? We want to use the special word called document. Document is what is called a reserved word in JavaScript, just like const is a reserved word, or let, or console, all special words that the browser just knows, oh, we know what you mean by document. And what do you want to do with this HTML document? Well, I want to get an element. I want to get something that's already in my HTML, and I want to get it by the ID. Okay, and so we pass in these parentheses, and we'll go into more about parameters and functions, and when we're calling code, how that all works and what that backs out to in syntax land. There is a list of reserved words, Alina, and Karen, I believe, had that in her slides from yesterday. But if you just do a Google search for reserved words JavaScript, that will pop right up. One thing to note, Java and JavaScript, two completely separate languages that are not related to each other at all. And so when you are doing your searches, if you do something like reserved words, you may get a list of reserved words that is for Java, completely separate. You want to make sure that you are saying JavaScript, so Google knows what programming language you're referencing. Anyway, we want to get an element by the ID. Well, we want to get the heading, right? Specifically the H1. So what I am going to do is I'm going to come back into my HTML, and I've got my H1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it an ID, and I'm going to say my ID is my heading H1. Okay, so now, just like in CSS, we could target that. In our JavaScript, we can hook into that as well. So I'm going to go over to my JavaScript, and I'm going to say get element by ID, and I am going to use heading H1. Okay, I'm going to save that. I'm going to hop over to Chrome. I'm going to refresh. Nothing happens. Why didn't anything happen? Well, we told it to get it,
but you didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't do anything with it. We just said, go get it. And it was like, all right, I got it. That's it. It's all you told me to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into my code, and I'm going to console.log my heading. And the reason we are console log is not for the computer. The computer is like, I don't care what you put in console log. I'll put out whatever is in there, but it doesn't impact my performance. Console log is for you as a developer to say, I want access to what you have in your memory. I need to be able to see this. And it is called what is called as a debugging function, right? It is a way for us to get insight into the computer. So if I come over here and I refresh, all of a sudden my H1 is in here that has my JS playground. So we just proved that the get is working. Now let's just prove that it is working. If I say get heading H1A, right? And I come over here and I refresh, notice I get null. Null means, well, I know what the variable my heading is called, but it isn't initialized to anything. It doesn't have any value. And so in programming, different programming languages have different names for this, but null is a commonly used reserved word that means the variable exists, but it doesn't have a value. So it is value. It has a value of null, which just means nothing. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to get my heading back. I don't need to console log it because I know it's working. I've got access to it. Now let's do something with it. So I am going to say my heading, and I am going to target a specific property on my heading. And that property is called text content. And in my text content, I'm going to say going crazy in my JS lookout. So can anyone guess what, before I refresh the page, what that is going to do?
Is it going to overwrite your field?
Exactly. So I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm going to refresh. And you notice for a split second, if I refresh, it looked like something was in there for a second, and then it popped over and it said going crazy in my JS lookout. What happened there is it read all of my HTML, and my HTML had that H tag in it that said JS Playground. And so what did Chrome do? It showed JS Playground. And it went la-di-da-di-da, oh, you've got this image, and oh, you've got these links, and oh, I'm going to apply the style sheet that you have all the way up at the top, and la-di-da-di-da, you've got your form in here, body's done, all set. Oh, script tag. Well, I already showed this H1, but you gave me this script tag, so I should go execute that. So it goes over to my script, and it goes, oh, my heading, document, I know what the document is. Oh, you would like a specific ID in the document? What one should I look for? Heading H1. Oh, where would you like me to put that? Put that in my heading. Okay, now we can access that in our JavaScript. So in my heading, I say text content, and I'm saying replace the text content with this value going crazy in my JS lookout. And so what happens is when we come back over here and refresh, we see going crazy in my JS lookout. And we can apply all of the fun of JavaScript here, right? So I can say in here, sum of two numbers, and then I can do a plus, and I can say 1 plus 1. And I'm going to save that. And what JavaScript's going to do is it's going to evaluate this out because it's not a string, it's numbers. And then it is going to concatenate that to my string. So I'm going to save, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to refresh, and I got my sum of two numbers too. All right, we're cooking with gas. Now I'm going to come back over here, and I want to do something with my input, right? I want to play around. I want to make it so when I click on the submit button, something's going to happen in my console. So what I'm going to do is on this submit button, I'm going to say on click. And on click, another special property, just like the source or the href or any of those. And I'm going to say, hey, use my search function. And I'm going to spell function wrong. Okay. Use my search function. And the browser's like, what's your search function? I've got no idea what that is. So I'm going to go back to my JavaScript, and I'm going to declare a new function. So in order to do that, I'm going to say function search function. And I'm going to give it parentheses there. And it's going to go, all right, well, what would you like to do in your search function? So I'm going to say console.log where searching baby. All right, we come over here. I come into my search. First of all, refresh the page. Okay, I type in ABC. I hit submit, and I get we're searching baby. So we just linked our HTML to our JavaScript, right? We said, hey, in our HTML, when that button is clicked, go look in our JavaScript, figure out where the search function is, and console log that or execute the code in there. So we're going to come back in here, and while this is great, we want to know what the user typed in. What are they searching for? So we are going to use our const search term, right? Just a new variable we're making up, and we are going to document.getElement by ID. And we are going to, we need an ID. So we're going to go back to our index. We're going to go up here and we're going to type in ID equals search input. Save that, hop back over to here, type in my search input here. And then we are going to console.log. We are searching for, and then I'm going to concatenate two strings together. And I'm going to say search term dot value. No, not node value. Value. And that is, again, another special property of the input. So just like we have text content up here for non-input fields, down here we have access to the value. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to type in hello and click submit. And I get, we are searching for hello.
That's so cool.
Pausing for questions.
Can JavaScript be used alone outside of the HTML context? in
Yes.
other Programming stuff?
Yes, and that is typically when you use Node.js, Node.js, and that's what we'll be using for server-side programming.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So Alina, you make a great comment that I would like to turn into a point, is that some people love HTML and CSS and cannot stand JavaScript. Some people will fall in love with backend programming or database programming and find that that is where they would like to specialize. The exact opposite definitely happens as well. Some people find that the visual is where they want to be and they have fun laying things out and getting things to look pretty, and that is great. I personally am on the flip side of that. I care about functionality, and I just want to get it out there. And my boss will come to me and he'll go, well, this is all great, but it looks like crap. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go in and I'll do my HTML, I'll do my CSS, and I'll make it look better, right? Some people love being on the front end. Some people love being in the back end. Some people love being in the database. Some people love being able to hop in between. And that's kind of where I'm at, is I like the ability to not only get everything on the page, but then make the buttons work, be able to get the search working, be able to go to the back end and write the code that I have to, you know. Part of the magic of the stack that we are teaching is that we use JavaScript everywhere. And we love JavaScript so much that we are even going to start teaching you guys React, which starts seeping your JavaScript even into your HTML file directly. And so the benefit of that is that we are using JavaScript in the browser. We're using JavaScript on the server. We're even using JavaScript to query the database. And so we've got this JavaScript so that when you write code somewhere, you can oftentimes take that code, put it right in the server, and it will also run back there. So this is a concept that is kind of like a, well, duh, that makes a lot of sense. But traditionally, programming languages did not, the language you use in the server, PHP or Python or whatever it was, didn't run in the browser because the browser was always dominated by JavaScript. There are very few programming languages outside of HTML and CSS that run in the browser. The last one that you are probably familiar with is this little one called Flash. That got killed off because JavaScript was so much more efficient and the browsers got on board with JavaScript and figured out ways to optimize it. Flash was known as a battery killer. And so this little product you guys may have heard of called the iPhone came out in 2007. And it was a big deal that they were not going to support Flash because a lot of interactivity was built in Flash. And Steve Jobs said it is a battery hog. It is fundamentally broken at the foundation of Flash. We're not going to support it. And had the iPhone not taken off, we may still be using Flash to this day. But fortunately, Flash has died a slow, painful death, and everyone is kind of on board with using JavaScript in the browser. We are now getting more and more people saying, hey, JavaScript is so great, we can also use it at the server. And that's where Node.js has become popular. Okay, one last thing I want to show you guys, and then I promise to end early and let you guys ask any questions. I also want to make sure that you have access to the code that is already in the Git repo, so you can play around with it, you know, on your own. There's no homework assignment for tonight, but if you guys are really enjoying all of this, I would encourage you to try and recreate the parts that we have done in class tonight. There will be homework this week. I promise that it's coming, just not for tonight. Okay, So what we are going to do is we have this form field down here called, do you like this photo, right? And I want to kind of make that work the same way, but we're going to go in reverse. Instead of our HTML linking into our JavaScript and saying, hey, HTML, go look for this JavaScript function, I'm going to do it all in my JavaScript. I'm going to tell my JavaScript, hey, when this event happens, when the person hits the enter button, we want to do something about that, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going.
Sorry.
Nope, you're all good. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our HTML, and we have our form here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add an ID to it, right? We want the ability to hook into that form. So we're going to say form ID equals tiger question. Okay, and we still have our label in there. We still have our input text. So I'm going to go back to my JavaScript, and I am going to say const form equals document.get element by ID, and we are going to say tiger question. And then I'm going to say, hey, form, I would like to add an event listener, right? And again, these are all functions that are built into JavaScript. At the DOM, the document object model, is the translation layer between your HTML and your JavaScript, right? So the DOM is kind of the middleman that is letting you access the document as objects. And we're going to go into objects later in JavaScript. But that DOM, just keep in mind, that's the translation layer. So, okay.
Oh, I was gonna say, isn't like the form considered an object, or anything that you do like when you have like a variable equaling some type of, I don't know, event? Or
yeah, so an object is, the joke in JavaScript is everything is an object. It's a little complicated of a joke to explain right now, but basically anything that is not a number or a string or a Boolean tends to be, or an array, and anything that is not one of those things tends to be an object. But objects are a little complicated to explain right now, so that's a rabbit hole I would love to go down, and in fact get to push Gus down instead, because he is teaching you the first 2 weeks of JavaScript, and then I come back and teach you the final 2 weeks. So anyway, what we're going to do is on our form, we're going to add an event listener, and there are all different kinds of events. So it needs to know what kind of event do you want me to listen for. So I'm going to say, listen for this event called submit. And it's going to say, okay, what would you like to do, right? I'm going to run this function whenever a submit happens. And so what we do is we say, all right, this function, whatever is in these curly braces is going to happen. So let's not get too far. I'm going to console.log, you submitted the form. Okay, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to hit enter. Well, that was weird. It's like it refreshed the page. Hey, what'd you do with my input? Well, what's happening here is it goes, oh, you're submitting the form? We're going to refresh the page. We're going to submit that to this page and reload it all over again. We're like, sometimes that's helpful if we want to submit the form to a server, but I don't want you to do that. I would really like it if you would take the event and prevent it from doing the default thing that you do. Okay, and so I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to hit enter. Now notice it not only didn't refresh the page, but I said you submitted the form. Okay, so from here, I can do exactly what I did up here. I can get the document by element ID. I can go over to my input. I can put a ID of tiger input on it. I can come over here. I can do a tiger input. Capitalization matters. And then I can console log out my search term dot value. Come over here, refresh the page, type something in, hit enter, and it shows up in our console. So the last thing we're going to do, and this is from a clean code perspective. So everything works here, right? Like it's all doing everything we want it to. At this point, we could say we are done. But sometimes you want to go in and go through a process called refactor your code, right? And refactor your code is just cleaning it up so it's a little cleaner. And so what we're going to do here is a label tag is great, but label tags often require a for attribute that we're going to add onto it. And it's saying, what is this label for? Like, what does this go with? What input does this go with? And so we are going to say, this is a label for the tiger input. And so what happens, I'm purposely not refreshing my code. When I click on this label, it's like, what are you doing? This is just text. But because we put that special for property on it, and that for is matching the ID of our input, when we come over here and now refresh the page, when I click on the label, you see how it highlighted my input for me? It just linked those two up for me. So that's just a nice magic thing that the browser does under the hood. But as long as the ID on the input matches the for tag on the label, that's all going to gel together. Okay, last thing I'm going to show you guys, and then I am ending a whole 30 minutes early. All of this code is accessible. If we go to GitHub, you should have the Careers in Code Classroom code base. I'm going to open that up. And if I go to Cohort 2, Module 2, Week 2, you see 3 different folders in here. I tried to follow the naming convention that we were using. So day 2, JavaScript 330. So today's date. And in here, you will see all the files that we ended up creating together. And so you can pop open any one of those and have access to the code. With that said, if you would like to get fancy and you already have the Git repo cloned on your computer, you should be able to open any Git UI of your choice, whether that's VS Code, Git Kraken, GitHub Desktop, or SourceTree, and pull that code down. And if you can figure out how to pull that code, you will also have all of the code that you can access through github.com. That's a bonus, that's extra credit. You can access the files this way, that's completely fine.
So we have to figure out how to get it, or are you going to tell us where it is?
Nope, I'm going to encourage you guys to use whatever Git UI you are leaning into and to figure out how to pull that code. If you pull it successfully, you will see in Module 2, there should be a Week 2 folder, and then you will see these 3 folders in it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this Day 2 News 330 to Day 3 News 331, and that is what we will be covering tomorrow. Again, just to give you a quick preview of that, this is the mockup. This is what would be considered a high fidelity mockup. The reason it is high fidelity is because it has some color in it. You can see some content showing up, and it has all the images in it as well. So what I'm going to do is fly through this in the first half of class tomorrow. You guys are not going to keep up. That is completely fine. We're going to go lightning speed through it all. And then we are going to save the second half of class for any place that you are stuck. If you guys are not stuck, I will go through it much slower, step by step, and you can follow along. If you guys are ripping through it and have questions, we're going to pause, we're going to interrupt, we're going to answer those questions, and we're going to go back to it. This project will be your weekend homework. So you do not have to have this done by the end of class tomorrow. And we've got an entirely separate project for Thursday. So if you do not have this done at the end of class tomorrow, you will not be behind for Thursday's class. So again, this is all tomorrow. Cups of coffee, to each his own on coffee consumption and how late you consume. I definitely need to start switching myself to decaf, because I get to the end of class and I am so wired and so exhausted that I am not tired. And it is a painful, painful thing.
It was actually a joke, but okay.
Anyway, this is what we're creating. This is a very common workflow. So you guys, when you get into the workforce, it is common to be handed a mock-up and say, go code all of this out. So we won't be using any JavaScript for this. We will be using Bootstrap Grid, only because if you look at this content, it's naturally gridded, right? And so we'll talk about those divs and talk about nesting it and all of that stuff. That is for tomorrow. I am going to save the next 28 minutes for any questions about today's content, around JavaScript, around the grid, about how we're flexing it, if we want to add anything to the existing files, anything like that. But before I do, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the pace of class tonight, and give me an open mouth if you're like, what the hell just happened? Okay, I will take that. Perfect. All right. Going to stop here. If you don't have questions, you can get out of here. If you don't have questions but would like to hear what other people's questions are, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, this recording, in theory, should already be on YouTube, and you can already go back and start replaying it. It will show up as live until I end it, but I believe it will let you rewind it. And if it doesn't, it will as soon as we're done with class.
Yeah, so I kind of hate to play like catch up or whatever, but like I don't know if this is the right time or not to ask, but like I have like some assignment that I'm missing.
Okay.
And I'm trying to like finish well, I'm in the midway of completing like the wireframe mockup thing. Does it have to be completed, or should I just send it over?
Doesn't have to be completed. I would say that staying up with class is more important than completing the assignment. Excuse me. I would also prioritize the assignments from the more recent assignments than the older assignments. So like, don't submit them in order that they were due, submit them in the order of the most recently due ones. With all of that said, there is the word done does not exist in a programmer's vocabulary. Done is what's the quote? Done is the enemy of a perfectionist, something along those lines. My brain is so shot I can't even remember it, but there is always something more that you can do. Obviously, with these smaller assignments, it is easier to get to that done state, but don't worry about whether it's done or not. If you have something that you would like to show the instructors to both say, hey, look, I'm making progress, or hey, I have something I would like feedback on, that is when you should submit the assignment.
Okay.
Perfect is the enemy of done. Thank you, Caitlin. That is what my brain could not get the words out in the right order.
Close enough.
Yeah, very cool. All right, well then I'll just submit it probably. Like the only thing I'm missing in that assignment is just the footer portion.
Yep, and that's fine to skip over. We have that submission deadline for Sunday because we're trying to get instructor feedback back to you guys by the following Friday or Sunday. With that said, we're not looking that you submitted it 2 days late and are going to mark you down for that, right? Like, this is a boot camp, and the whole point of having a grade on the assignment is just so you get some feedback from the instructor. So if you miss an assignment, that's completely fine. We are going to try and make it clear of like, hey, this assignment builds on each other. So, you know, get this done tonight and forget about previous assignments, or like the assignment from everything we just did in class today. Don't even want you guys to turn it in. If you want to play with it, if you want to try and replicate it, if you want to play it around, totally encourage you to do that. If you would rather use that time to catch up, that's totally fine. However, after tomorrow, I'm going to say definitely prioritize what we did in class tomorrow, because that's going to be due on the weekend, right? So assignments are going to be different. We're pretty flexible with that. But if you have questions about that, if you go, I'm behind, here are the 5 things I know I need to get done, feel free to ping the instructor, and the instructor can give you some advice of, this is probably more important to get done than something else. Latanya, you had a great question. Mobile first design isn't necessarily about optimizing the code to be efficient to run on the device. What mobile first design typically means is, before we even get to the code, when we are at the wireframe and or mockup stage, instead of creating a website that you think of it, right, of like, I'm on a 13-inch laptop screen, it's going to show up this certain way. Instead, what you do is you start with the mobile screen and you go, oh, well, I only have this tiny little rectangle that's 4 inches wide. I need to design all of my components on that first. And so when you wireframe, when you mock up, you design for mobile, and then you create an entirely second wireframe or mock-up where you lay everything out on the desktop. Depending on the company, you also create a third one for the tablet. Sometimes you can get away with not doing the tablet because it looks closer to the desktop than it does on mobile. But it's this notion of, if I work within the smallest constraints first and figure out how to fit everything on my phone screen, it's much easier to get that design to look well on a bigger laptop or tablet screen. But if I start my design on the laptop or tablet screen, it's much harder to figure out how to lay everything out so it fits on my mobile screen. And so mobile first design is truly about the design, right? It isn't about the coding nature of it. It's about having that all thought out so that by the time that you get to coding it, it becomes much easier to say, oh, on my mobile display, I want it to look like this, or wrap these elements down, or whatever it may be. But on my desktop display, I would like it to look like this.
Okay, and that's industry standard, because I was thinking of like responsive web and like device widths and all of that. So I guess I was misinterpreting.
Yeah, so all of the stuff that you mentioned is super important and factors into implementing the mobile design. But when you specifically see mobile first design, like those 3 words together, that typically means that the designer, when they start with a blank slate, they are starting with mobile and then getting themselves into a bigger display size, as opposed to starting with display, which as opposed to starting with desktop, which has been the industry standard for so long and is now being replaced with the more popular start with mobile and work your way up to desktop. So weekly feedback, feel free to split the form. If you've got feedback that you would like to share about me, just, mention that. I will leave that up to you guys. Because I'm teaching 3 days, I would say that the majority of the feedback should be about what I'm teaching. But if you've got feedback for Karen, definitely share that as well. The form responses are not like automated. We go through and we read all of them. So if you've got a comment for Karen, just say, you know, oh, I found Karen's teaching super helpful when, or man, I hate that Max is teaching through so many puns, I can't stand it anymore. You know, whatever, just feel free to brain dump onto the form. Scrolling up to see if there are. Latanya, you had a question about flowchart with visual design and what tags or elements to use in your HTML. No, sorry. At this point, I start answering the question, then my brain thinks about the question, and then I'm able to get it out into my mouth. There's no visual aid that I am thinking of that just jumps into my brain. The good news is there aren't a ton of tags built into HTML. So I would say that there are probably, I'm going to go high and say 50, but there are probably 30 that I could name off the top of my head. And probably half of them actually have visual impacts. So like H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, all the same thing. They just get smaller as you go down, right? And then like P tags and span tags, pretty much the same thing, just one defaults to inline, one defaults to block. You've got your input tags, your button tags, and your form tags. They kind of all go together. You've got a BR, which is a line break, which I don't know if you count or not. You've got helpers like the script tag and the link tag. You've got your body and your head. I'm kind of running out of things off the top of my head that I can think of I use in my HTML. So I'm sure you could Google like, what do the default HTML tags look like, and get some quick overview of like, this is what an H1 looks like, this is what an H2 looks like, you know, and goes all the way down the list. When you get into Bootstrap will not only style those default elements that are built into HTML for you, they are going to provide you additional class names that you can use to have something like a nav already made for you without having to flex all over the place and space between and all of that fun stuff. So I have intentionally kept Bootstrap out of tomorrow's project. And if you take a look at that screenshot, you'll look at that and go, that's not a terrible looking website. It's not pretty. It's not going to win a design award, but you know, it doesn't look bad. We are going to use the layout system in Bootstrap. We are going to use the grid over there, mainly because that website would take me probably 3 times as long to create without the grid system. And that is because I know the grid system like the back of my hand, and I use Flex only when I am forced to. Only when I go, oh, I want to go that thing up there and I can't just get out there. That is when I use the Flex system. Some developers swear by Flex, and they also swear by CSS Grid, which it was kind of born out of Bootstrap's grid. It's built right into the browser. You don't need Bootstrap for it. It is more flexible than Bootstrap Grid. It works great. It is arguably more performant than Bootstrap Grid in terms of the browser being able to render it. With all of that said, I am a Bootstrap Grid fanboy. This screenshot, this whole thing, I created in 56 minutes today. I was going to create the wireframe and the mockup for it and then kind of teach through it. And then I realized I had to create the code for it for you guys anyway. And so I created this whole thing in 56 minutes. That is the benefit of Bootstrap. I won't do it in 56 minutes tomorrow, but I am going to try and keep it to an hour and a half, which is going to feel really fast for you guys. but the idea is to see, kind of hear it once, be blown away by it, and then take the second half of class to catch up, use the YouTube video, all of that fun stuff. So it is going to be a different pace than today. And you will have days in class that you feel like you're really getting it. And you will have days in class where you're like, what the hell was that instructor thinking? They went way too fast. I am going to ding them for that in their feedback form. Sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes we need a good little slap across the face to go, whoa, you're going way too fast. So we will see how we end up tomorrow. I will not have office hours on Saturday because I will be in the air on the way to San Francisco. So what I will offer is either office hours on Friday evening, like 6 o'clock-ish, or I will leave the door open for office hours on Sunday to be determined of the time. The other thing, I don't know what Caitlin's flexibility is, but if Sunday does not end up working out or Friday night does not end up working out for me, Caitlin is definitely a great resource. Caitlin can write all of this code that I have written and covered tonight. So we will figure out office hours. I'm glad I'm thinking of that now. I know they definitely will not be on Saturday, but there is a possibility of them being either Friday night or Sunday.
I have a question about the weekly feedback.
Yes.
We obviously put our name in.
Yes.
Does the instructor, TA, etc., who is being feedbacked to, do they know whose feedback specifically, or does it kind of go into a repository and then they just go down through the...
At the moment, we can see who is submitting the feedback. That is something that came out of cohort 1 of, hey, it would be great if we had the option of anonymity. It would also be great if we had some kind of like double blind system, right? So Jesse and Dana could see who submitted the feedback, but the instructor wouldn't be able to see that. At this point, we don't have that set up. I can't speak on behalf of Hack Upstate, but what I can say is that because the instructors do have access to who submitted it, and I may get, not that I would get in trouble for saying this, but something that I would propose is if you would like to submit that feedback, what you could do is in the name field, just like use a Google Doc system, right? So Google Docs picks the color and an animal. So you can submit, when you open up a Google Doc and you're anonymous, instead of your name popping up, you appear as a blue alpaca or a green lizard.
Purple unicorn.
Right, exactly. Whatever, just put something in there and then mention to Doug and Jesse, like, hey, wanted to submit this anonymously this week, but I submitted as blue unicorn, right? And so that way we know you guys submitted. We have a way to get back to you if there's a part of that feedback. So we had there were 3 or 4 times in cohort 1 where we received feedback that wasn't just like, oh, the instructor can improve on this. It was, we need to get better at this for the next week in the module, or this needs to be something that we end up covering. And so we are able to take that feedback, and because most of us work in an agile project management system at our full-time job, Jesse and Doug, and I'm sorry, Jesse and Dana and Jason and the instructors are able to put their heads together and really quickly say, next week we're throwing this out the window and we're going to focus on this instead. But there are also times that we will get feedback that Jason goes, oh, that's not right. We need to touch base on this. Can we set up a meeting with you as the student? And if you submit a truly anonymous name, there's no way for us to get back to you and say, hey, can we get some time on your schedule and chat about this and figure out a solution? So I would encourage you, if you are going to use that anonymous naming system, that you just shoot a Slack message to Jesse and Dana, and just say, I submitted the feedback form this week as this person. And then we will probably come up with a better system down the road. But that is an option that I will throw out that I will say was not pre-approved by Jesse or Dana or anyone running the system.
I know usually you can't evaluate your supervisor, your professor. And if you say something about your professor, sometimes it comes back and bites you in the grade. So, and I know that's not how we work here, but also, you need to, I just wasn't quite sure how that worked. If, only a couple of people actually read through them and then you concatenated.
Yeah, Jesse's pretty good at going through the reports and posting a summary. But I personally, at the end of every week of teaching, like seeing the weekly feedback is one of my favorite things to do.
That's because you're awesome.
Well, especially when people have feedback for me that is constructive. I actually find the constructive criticism more emotion inducing than the positive feedback, right? Not that I'm like rage quitting on you guys and being like, oh my God, I can't believe these stupid students don't get, it's not like that at all. It's
no, you're not like that. No, you're awesome.
I really enjoy that. And I will say that there isn't any feedback that I read where I'm like, who said that? Like, how dare they? Or where I targeted back at the student. With that said, if we wanted to, we could. And so that is why I will throw out that anonymous system.
Is that a promise or a threat? I'm kidding. I'm going to send you a bad eval just to see what you do. No.
I'll remember not to use you on my resume as a reference.
He wasn't in the cohort. It was his twin brother, Bill.
So I will throw out that anonymous system, and then that is something that I will put on our feedback list for our Friday meetings.
I mean, it's not an issue for me. I was just curious, how it went, because, if you did have something to say like, well, would that instructor see it first, or would someone else, they could, or I don't know. It's not that important to me personally. So
no, it's a fair question. And it's something I've actually chatted with someone else involved in the program about already. And it's something that I had feedback that I had thoughts about at the end of cohort 1. It's just something we haven't gotten around to iterating on. So it's a very valid question. What I can say, the way the system currently works is there is a spreadsheet that all the instructors and Hack Upstate staff and everyone has access to. And it does have your name associated with each one of the responses. Mm-hmm. And while 90% of the time that is beneficial, that definitely runs into the well, I would like to be honest, but I don't want to be cruel or have it, come back at me or anything like that. Especially because there are certain instructors in this program that you just can't get rid of because they keep coming back after module after module after module.
What you're talking about.
It's just you hear all of these puns and you go, oh my God, can we ever get rid of them?
I have a degree from Penn University in Pennsylvania, so you have met your match, but it's not my forum right now. So I let you be the lead on it.
Anyway, it's a good question, and it's something that I will bring up at our Friday meetings, and hopefully you will see the results of how we can iterate and come up with things.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say, that I am so impressed. I mean, I've never been through any kind of boot camps or anything before. I haven't been in school for years. I haven't worked for years. The responsiveness. I mean, you guys mean it. You really take the feedback and I've seen you like rework the workflow and the whatever. And it's like, bringing us all in from the ledge when we're about to go, man, I can't do this. I'm out of here. And I really appreciate that because you put your money where your mouth is. That makes a quality boot camp. And it's like responsive web design, responsive curriculum design. Is there, I'm an educator, I should know if that's a term, but
Well,
I'm just really impressed by it, and you can share with everyone how impressed I am.
I can't speak on behalf of all the instructors, but I can speak on, I can say that I personally know probably 3/4 of all the instructors. I have had a beer with most of them. I can say that out of the 75% that I do know, none of them are here for the paycheck. Yes, we are getting paid, and but you know, that's not why we're here. That's not why we're teaching. It may be a factor, but it is not the primary
Believe
factor.
in this.
And that primary factor is we believe in it. We enjoy teaching, and we want to get you guys to understand this concept, this content. So that's why we are rapidly iterating, right? And it is only cohort 2. Feedback we got from cohort 1 was like, we didn't know that it was flexible. We didn't know, like, we didn't think to ourselves, oh, this is the first cohort going through the program. So we didn't know to provide that level of feedback. And so I will say that to you guys now is you are only the second cohort going through this. And we have changed probably a good quarter of the curriculum, shifting things around, having you spend more time on some things, you know, having you spend less time on others, realizing that the instructor who taught security in cohort 1 was not a security expert, knew next to nothing about security, and probably should not be teaching security.
That's true of a lot of teachers.
I taught this security.
No, stop that. You're self-deprecating. I have another quick question, and I'll shut up for a bit, maybe. I think we're related. There's a typical length in terms of weeks, months for coding boot camps, or can you, I mean, you kind of, in order to qualify as a boot camp, you kind of have to fit within that? Because one of my thoughts is maybe another option is spreading it out, and people want to do this, 6 months is enough, but spreading it out a little more, a little slower pace, but still, you know, but I don't know if that interrupts with the certification for this. And
yeah, so complicated question. And I can tell you that both Jesse and Doug, who you don't see a lot of involvement through the program, but he is very much behind the scenes. And I don't think I could come up with a random name that I've, you know, just off the top of my head, and Doug would go, oh yeah, I know him. Doug is amazingly connected. But anyway, the funding of the program definitely impacts the length of the program. We try to strike the balance between how can we get as much content in your heads, even if it feels overwhelming, so you are best qualified for the job market. There were discussions around, do we make it a three-month program and just ship front-end developers out the door? Do we make it a 6-month program and only meet half the time and still ship front-end developers out the door? What matched up best with the funding and the program length and the job skills is what we,
and the job market,
what we have now. And it's very much how we did it with cohort 1. With that said, there are very few boot camps that are accredited, only because it is such a new field. And it was major headlines, I want to say, within the past year when the first boot camp got the same accreditation that college programs get. So there are boot camps that are 2 years long. There are boot camps that are 3 months long. There are boot camps that are all self-paced, where they go, look, we recorded all these videos. Here are all the videos. You go through the videos at whatever pace you want. We are going to grade the crap out of you. And we're going to give you tests, and we're going to give you assignments. And if you do 4 tests a day and are getting A's on all of them, we don't care that you can finish this boot camp in a week. You prove you know the knowledge, great. And you know what? There are certain developers where they'll go, I'm having trouble standing out in the job market. I think I'm a senior dev. I think I know these concepts really well. I'm going to pay for the boot camp, and I'm going to pay monthly because I know I can breeze through all the content. And by the time I get to the end of it, I'm going to have a certification that says, look, I graduated from this boot camp. Doesn't matter that I didn't really learn anything there. I just went through the program, took
You
their
have the
test, got the
paperwork,
certifications, and
yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, you got to play the game.
So yes, we know it is an option to adjust the amount of content. We know it is an option to adjust the time length. A lot of factors in play there. I would love to see Hack Upstate also offer a flexible option where you go, look, either you pay monthly or your employer sponsors you, or however the funding works out, where you can go through this program. And if it takes you 9 months, it takes you 9 months. Obviously, that is a whole second curriculum, a lot harder to get on board and get set up, but open to options there for sure.
And of course, the self-paced can be a problem because, you know, this makes you keep at it. You know, well,
Yes.
tonight I don't feel like studying, you know, well, I have to.
Yes.
And it's a good, because human nature, you know, work expands to fit the time allotted.
Exactly.
I had a professor that used to always say that. So yeah, no, I was just curious because I have no suggestions to do that or anything. I just was curious as an educator. Thank you.
Yes, lots of discussions around that agileness and the program length and all of that fun stuff.
Thank you.
Can I jump in with a question?
Shoot.
That normalized, that's the style sheet we use.
Yes.
Is that just like a standard URL that you can use? Okay, I just wanted to double check on that. And then for the domains, I have one that's through GoDaddy, so I'm interested in what issues you have with them, because I just finished being very upset with MailChimp, and they kept trying to blame GoDaddy. But anyway, can I just switch it to name change if it's going to be an issue?
To Namecheap, you can transfer it. The transfer process takes like up to 5 days.
Oh.
However, if you know what to expect, it's 5 minutes of work and then 5 days of waiting. And so I can help you transfer it. What I have against GoDaddy is they are just the biggest name and they charge an arm and a leg. And so for domains, they charge a little bit more. For hosting, they charge out the butt compared to what you can get elsewhere. And their support is like non-existent because they have so many hundreds of thousands of domains and customers that like their support, I hate to say you get the person in India, but like, you know, it's like everything you do, you are in the wrong because the system has to work for everyone else. So you're the stupid one who can't figure it out, according to their customer service. That's what I've experienced. I don't find them to be particularly technically progressive. I just GoDaddy and 1&1, which I think is now called Ionos, suffers from the same problem of like they're just too big. They're just not a fan of them. I will say Google Domains is my backup. I like Namecheap, I like Google Domains, and then the third one that I like is Cloudflare, Cloudflare. A little bit more advanced, you get more functionality out of them. The weird thing with them right now is they're pretty new at domains, so you cannot buy a new domain at Cloudflare. You have to have a domain already and then transfer it into Cloudflare. Which again, if you know how to transferring domains super easy. If you don't know how to transfer it, can be super frustrating. And it is totally, well, you know, one points the finger at one person and the other one points it right back at the other. So I can help you transfer a domain, probably a good question, either to schedule like a 15 or 30 minute Calendly where we can do that one-on-one, or to do it at the beginning or end of office hours. To help you through that. Not a requirement. Transferring the domain should never be a requirement. If anyone tells you you have to transfer the domain, they are probably wrong. DNS is flexible enough that you can point it at someone else. But if you would like help transferring the domain, I'm happy to help you through that.
Max, I also had a question about that. I have a couple of domains, and I was wondering how you felt about DreamHost.
DreamHost, I have nothing against. They are smaller. Smaller is not a bad thing. They are mid-sized. They're not super tiny, so that when you do something through them, you never hear back from support. But they're not so big that you are just another number to them. So I personally have nothing against DreamHost. I personally like to split out my hosting from my domains. So I tend to end up hosting my websites at a different site than where I purchased the domain. But that is only because I tend to have more hosting requirements than the $4 a month hosting plan supports. We have a $300 a month hosting bill at work because we use probably 8 or 9 of Google Cloud's products. And that is considered low for most companies. So obviously different requirements for me. What we will be doing on Thursday is using GitHub Pages, which is a free host, and there are limitations there. But for what we are deploying, it is completely fine. And to get a basic info site up about you, completely fine to do. In fact, my info site, it's not hosted through GitHub Pages, but it is entirely possible to do it through GitHub Pages. So long answer short, I don't mind Bluehost. If you've got a domain there that you would like to use, just figure out how to get to the domain name settings. Sometimes they call it the advanced DNS settings. If you can figure out how to get there, you will be able to follow along with class and get everything mapped over and pointing over to GitHub, but nothing against Bluehost themselves.
Thanks.
Any other questions before I help Susan with Git Kraken and GitHub?
I had a question about Flexbox, but maybe we can push it off to the office hours on Friday night or whenever they end up being.
Why don't you ask the question and then I'll figure out if we push it.
Okay, well, when we did the Flexbox Froggy exercise,
Yeah.
I wasn't understanding how the order property worked.
Yeah.
And I found another thing about it in that W3 Schools website, and it makes sense to me there, but it doesn't seem like that's what it was doing in Flexbox Froggy. Like you could just put in different numbers and several numbers worked, and the number didn't seem to have any correlation with what was happening on the screen. I just found it confusing.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to take what you understood from W3C and create a blank index.html, create a blank style sheet, and just create 3 divs and have it be div with the letter A in it, div with the letter B in it, and div with the letter C in it. And then make the IDs for those divs ABC as well, right? Get them to show up in Flex and get them to show up ABC, and then use the order property to try and get it to show up CBA.
Okay.
Right, and that's when you're gonna start getting your head around the order and going, oh, well, if I make C order 1, and if I make B order 2, and I make A order 3, that's going to order them because 1, 2, 3.
Right. That's what it was doing on the W3 schools. It was giving an order to each one, but they were only giving an order to one element or one frog, I'll say, on the Flexbox Froggy. And I think that's where it got confusing.
Yeah. So if you think about, I can't think to the exact Flexbox Froggy level, but if you think of if I want all of my green frogs at the top and then all my yellow frogs at the bottom, even though they may start the page intermixed, if I target my green frogs and say order 1, and then I target all of my yellow frogs and say order 2, that is going to get all my green frogs at the top, even though I'm applying order to multiple frogs. It's going to group all the 1s together, and then it's going to group all the 2s together.
The yellow frogs, but there was only 1. Okay, maybe that's part of it that I didn't understand. I don't know. There were only 3 frogs in the first one, so yeah, I'll look at it some more and do what you suggested. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any quick questions before we help Susan?
Sorry, Susan. I didn't realize one person was waiting for help. Good night, folks.
Not saying you were being impatient, Susan. Just didn't want to forget you.
No, it's
Good
okay.
night,
I didn't know
everyone.
if it
Thank
was
you.
seen.
Stay out of trouble. Thank you, Caitlin. You're awesome too. Everyone's
Thank
awesome.
you. I'm
Well,
trying
you-
my best.
Well, you don't have to try. You got it. Let me
Thanks.
just check one thing in the chat here. All right. So, ciao, Bella.
See ya tomorrow. Is it bad that my brain didn't think? I was like, see you. Wait, is tomorrow when I will see you next? That is the point of processing my brain is at. Do you want to share your screen?
Yes, I think that is what I should do because I didn't know how to word it, but I have like digital clutter, I would say already. And I feel like I want to start from zero,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
Because I was doing stuff in VS Code and then I thought I was using this correctly.
Okay.
But then there's all this stuff and I tried to delete things and it's like just a mess. And then when I went into the Git Kraken, there's all the commits I thought I did are not done. And it's just starting to like overwhelm me because I want to start from the beginning so that I know that I'm doing things right, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yep. So
Because I was doing everything in VS Code, I wasn't in here.
Okay, so let me ask this first. And there are 3 answers to this question. Are you
Okay.
finding VS Code makes more sense to you? Are you finding Git Kraken makes more sense to you? Or are you finding that you're at this middle ground where you're like, there's got to be a better way?
It's probably the middle ground, but like I was using the VS Code because I was in it and I didn't really get why I would come back out to this.
Yeah.
Does that
and
make
so-
sense?
Absolutely. And so there are times if I'm like working on a couple lines of code and I like commit it and I want to move on to the next thing, I do it all inside my text editor. So the equivalent of VS Code, right? I commit in there, I move on, I do the next thing. If I'm working on 15 different files and I've got a couple hundred lines of code that I'm pushing up, I go out to my UI tool, which I happen to use SourceTree, but Git Kraken works the same way. And that I go, I want to make sure that I'm only staging the files that I know I've edited and like I want a better visual. I want to go in line by line and approve them. I want to make sure that I'm on the right branch. Like I just want more information before I just send that code up. And so I am a very odd person that I use both the commit in my text editor and I use a separate tool for it. There's nothing wrong with doing it. I've been doing it that way for years. It is what works for me. I have some developers on my team that only go through the text editor and they think I'm so dumb for using SourceTree because they show me every place in my text editor that does all the same functionality of Git Kraken. I have other developers on my team, especially junior developers, who think committing in VS Code is super limiting and that they only feel comfortable committing in Git Kraken. So it is a spectrum. And the thing that makes it more complicated is that one end of the spectrum forks into 3 popular tools: SourceTree, Git Kraken, and GitHub Desktop. So it is entirely possible that you're like, I like what Git Kraken is trying to do, but I'm not in love with Git Kraken itself. And you should try GitHub Desktop and or SourceTree to find out if you like them more. However, with all of that said, switching that tool is not going to fix kind of where you have gotten into. So to fix that, I will say, do you feel, throw Git out the window for just a minute. Do you feel like your files are organized in a way that you like them now?
No.
Okay. So we're going to still keep Git out the window and we're going to get your files organized in a way that you feel comfortable with them.
Okay.
And so
yeah, that's probably the beginning.
The only requirement I would say is that your code folder and the classroom code base folder have to be separate folders.
Yes.
Outside of that requirement, you can organize your code however the hell you want. If you say, I don't like folders and I'm just going to get clever with file names, that's completely fine. I think and it will be interesting to see how other instructors come into this. If you like the separate day notion, if you like dating the folders, like whatever works for you is completely fine. Just figure out that system and get your files in that system in your code folder.
Okay.
And I would suggest doing that outside of VS Code, outside of GitKraken. Just pop open Finder and shove things into folders and create new folders until you have it in a way that makes sense for you.
Well, I started doing that, and then what happened was the folder I renamed something on the, in Finder, and then in GitHub or wherever, because I renamed it, I screwed it up because it was looking for something it couldn't find.
Don't worry about GitHub. What we're basically going to do, or Git as a whole, get it the way you want it in Finder, and then go into GitKraken, and you see where it says stage all changes
on the right here. No.
Yep. Top right green button. Further.
I
sorry.
see it now. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So what you're going to do is you're going to not care what is in that list. You're going to hit stage all changes, and you're going to make your commit message summary as reorganized shit.
Okay.
And you're going to commit that, and Git is going to do whatever it needs to do to get over itself and say, all right, this is the new structure. So
right,
now, do you feel like you've got things organized the way you want them, though?
Right now?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so don't do this commit until you've got everything the way you want it in Finder.
Okay, I see.
Get it all right in Finder, go, I'm confident with this. Go into GitKraken and go, I don't care what the hell you think happened. This is the way I'm rolling.
Yep.
And commit that in. And then from there, when you create new files or you go back in and you edit any of the files, what you'll find is those are the only ones that are showing up as unstaged, because those are in your working copy, right? And so what you do is you then add them or stage them into what you are about to commit. You type in your commit message and you commit them. But what you will find is that you will start gravitating to, oh, I like how GitKraken showed me what I was about to commit. Or, oh, I liked that I could just do that commit easily in VS Code. Or I kind of like both, but I feel like there's got to be a better way out there. And that's when you can go look at the different tools.
Okay. And I guess one last question then. When I'm using VS Code, like what's the best practice? Like I do VS Code and I do a commit there, and then I should go back to GitKraken and do one there. Is that like what people do, or what's the way?
Nope. Once it's committed, it's committed. So what you will find is if you organize all your files, you stage any of the things that show up, you type in reorganize stuff, and you commit it in GitKraken, when you open VS Code, there will be nothing to commit.
Ah, because they're connected.
Because they're connected. And if vice versa, if you commit it in VS Code and you come back over here, all of a sudden there are not going to be any files that you can stage or commit because they're looking at the same files.
Okay.
And so I find that I do small, quick little commits in VS Code. And then if it's a bigger commit, the reason that I like source tree is if you click on module 2 day 3 wireframe hw.css.
Yeah.
Just single click on that. What it's going to do is it's going to show you the red lines are what you deleted or changed, and the green lines are what you added. So what that is trying to get you to see is text align left was in the file already, and you didn't modify that. But what you did is you deleted the display line and added 2 new lines underneath it for flex direction and align content. And so this may not seem super helpful now, But when you are doing huge commits where you're working on a bunch of different files, it's helpful to go like, oh, I deleted out this giant function that I didn't mean to, or, oh, I modified this HTML code, but I didn't change any of the CSS. That's probably not right there, or whatever it is. I don't find that VS Code is good at showing you this, which is called the diff view, right? DIFF, for the difference between the two files.
I like the VS Code diff, Max.
What?
I like the VS Code diffs.
Right, and so everyone is different there, right? And that's okay. If you find that VS Code is doing what you want, screw Git Kraken, uninstall it from your computer, full steam ahead on VS Code.
The difference, the diffs in VS Code, Susan, compared to this, is that they're side by side. So show you the new file the file that with your changes, that like the positives, and then the other file with like what you deleted. So it's like a side by side of the same file. It's called your working tree, and then the original file, basically.
Can you click the button that I just circled?
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
So that's what VS Code looks like. So that's why I think some people prefer that. Some people prefer what Max just showed you, where it's one file. You can see all the lines right on top of each other. So
and I can't. So my job, I have had 3 other developers on my team, and I sacrificed me writing any code because my developers were submitting so much code that I spent my whole day reviewing it. And so I would just have developers going, this code is ready. And they would say, please add this in, merge this in. And I would review it and go, no, this is broken, or like, you have some sloppy code here, or this is inefficient. And I would pass it back to them. They would make those code changes, submit it to me. We'd go through that cycle a couple times and then finally go, okay, this is ready to go. And I would submit that code out, right? Obviously, when you're working alone, you're not going to have that feedback process, but it starts setting you up right in terms of, reviewing your code before you actually commit it in. Instead of just going, yeah, this code's ready, going in at a line by line level and saying, yes, this is what I meant to add. And so I think VS Code has the same feature that Git Kraken does, that you can change the way you're viewing the file. I can't speak definitively on that, but all the tools do the exact same things. Whatever tool you end up using is completely fine. We're kind of putting the ball in your court at this point and saying, pick whatever tool you want. We encourage you to use one. If you go, screw Git, I'm not doing any of this stuff, we can't force you to, we're not going to kick you out of the program for doing that. Okay. Karen has found Git Kraken, and especially her boss really likes Git Kraken, right? And so she picked that tool, that's fine. The only reason I'm skewing away from this is that it has limitations on the private repo, and why we will probably use GitHub Desktop for the next cohort. But that's only because I think it has the cleanest, simplest, let's get your head around it without putting advanced features in front of you, right? So like you see up at the top, there's branch, stash, pop, boards, timelines. Like there's a lot in here where you're like, I've got no idea what I'm looking at. GitHub Desktop does a really good job of narrowing that down and just giving you what you need. I hate it. I still use Source Tree at work because I need all that flexibility. I'm using all of those features. But I think for the next cohort, we will say, use GitHub Desktop, get familiar on that. We'll still show you VS Code in case you prefer that, and then still leave the door open for other options. But that's not far off from what we're doing now. We're just saying, here's Git Kraken, here's VS Code. But at the end of the day, what really matters is that your files are organized. Because if your files are organized, Git's not going to work for you.
Right. That's it. I think I got to redo that and get it how it works for my brain. Because I was trying to follow what you were doing, and it's like, that just doesn't work for me. And it's already a hot mess, and I need to start fresh. That's
completely fine. And you're going to see, I know you probably already have a ton of files already. But you're going to see that as we start moving into more projects, that you're either reusing a lot of the code or like just duplicating the project, or it's less about these standalone, like, here's some JavaScript code we're writing today. Okay, now here's this nav bar and using JavaScript, and then, okay, here's this news site, and then here's this profile site. Like at the beginning, there are a lot of these standalone projects, but as we progress, you're going to find that it's more like, I've got my capstone and I've got this ongoing in-class code that I'm working on.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much. That is very helpful.
Awesome. We tried to
So-
be helpful.
You guys are. All right, thank you.